Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. You recognize in the studio, this is not on the road. I was supposed to be in Saskatchewan right now. I was supposed to be doing this interview somewhere outside of Saskatoon. Still in Alberta. We didn't move. Do you want to know why? The trailer we borrowed, it was a friend's. It's got some structural damage. I did my walk around. You know, as a pilot, I literally do walk around like every vehicle I use. And I did this for the RV, of course. Did the tires, buttoned up a bunch of stuff, and then made my way to the back where the ladder is, looked at the top corner, and a lot of damage. Kind of pulled on it a bit, and it was coming right off. One wind on the highway, that whole back's coming off. That's going to peel like a banana. Sorry, folks. I'm going to have to do it remote. I'm going to do my best to get all the same guests. Maxime will be there. We'll get, I'm not going to tell you who else I have yet because we're not confirmed yet, but Maxime's definitely going to be there, and we'll be able to talk to him. Are you on Twitter, guys? I know some of you are. It's getting crazy on there, but it's also getting lovely. If you caught Chris's spaces yesterday, it was wonderful. It was his first space, Twitter space. My first time ever being in one. I popped in as a listener, and I thought, hey, it might be cool to talk. And then I pushed this little button that said, become a speaker. And he said, yeah. And then I was on there. I got to say thanks to him because Chris, if you don't know this, Chris Erickson's a bit of an inspiration to me when I started on Twitter about a year ago. He's got a big following. He's got really the following. If you're in the right group, that's the group you want to be in. Well, if you care about freedom and holding the government accountable, that's the group you want to be in. And, he kind of opened his wings, let me in, and bada boom, bada bing. A year later, we got this show, got amazing guests, another one today. And Chris is starting his own show. So I got to say thank you to him. So if you were part of that, you got to hear that. It was really nice to be able to reach out and just let him know what he meant to me and how he helped me kind of navigate this path of obscurity, of being just in the bush, doing nothing about the things that are frustrating me, and then actually doing this. So Chris, if you ever watch this, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate it. Great show, or great space. And it was fun to be part of that. I'll be with Joe Rampart tonight, so I'll be joining his space. And over the weekend, I'll be joining Gov Corrupt. He's got a space on Sunday. So if you're into Twitter spaces, keep an eye on my timeline. You'll see those come up, and I'll let you know where they are and when they are. And we'll hear you there, right? There's no scene, but we'll hear you there. Motown, my buddy in Calgary. I got another Calgarian on today. Another one. We had Rob Anders last week, or actually earlier this week. It was Monday. And now we've got Cory Morgan. He's here. Done a mic check, done a video check. Everything's good. But Motown, Calgarian. Coffee is on, and I'm ready for a great informative show. Afternoon coffee. Ooh, you're a brave man. I'm usually done mid-afternoon, but it's good stuff. And thanks for your note. Motown, you reached out and said, hey, Jay, can I help you with your travels? I'll chip in for a room and that kind of stuff. I appreciate that, Motown. It's very lovely. It wasn't a financial reason. It's just accommodation. It was the plan we had. It was the RV. It just didn't work out. So we'll see you in Calgary soon now. I'll come down there and see you soon. Hey, Ellen. You knew Allie was here because he was chatting in the wrong window, hey? It's becoming a thing. You don't know Allie's here until he chats in the window. And hey, good morning, Tammy. Or good afternoon. Look at that. I'm still programmed for the morning show, Tammy. It's nice to see you. Very, very cool. And we got Padge. Hey, Padge. Hi to everybody. Thank you very much. Hey, Charlie, you're back. Good to see you again. Yeah, you're starting to come back more frequently now. I really like that. Thank you very much, Charlie. And we got Motown. We got Tammy. Railroaded. Toot toot. Welcome back. Good to see you. Railroad, is this a better time for you? Because it doesn't seem like the morning ones work well, but that's really just a replay. But does this work for you, Railroaded? I like the afternoon. Hey, chat. Yeah, there you go. And Charlie's having a good time. It was an awesome night with Chris. Yeah, Tammy, I saw you in there. And it's so neat to go and enter a space and see so many of you from this chat on YouTube over on Twitter as well. Tammy was there. Motown was there. Ellen was there. It was really neat. Even Gov Corrupt was there. Yeah, he was the host. It was a really cool time. Ellen, it was sad to hear Lois in that space. Wasn't that amazing, though? Like, we just went through that story with Donald Best yesterday. I don't know if it's divine intervention or what, Ellen, but I was paying attention, but I was also working, preparing for the Cory show, preparing for the Jeremy. Why did I just draw a blank on his name? Mackenzie. Jeez, of course. Working on his show for Saturday. And yeah, there Lois comes on and she says, I'm the sterile Indian. I'm like, we know who she is, or he is, right? And listened and listened. And then unfortunately, she kind of got cut off because I'm not sure if the host knew who she was or really where she was going with that story. But as you heard there, Ellen, at the end, she did apologize for cutting her off because that was a wonderful, wonderful thing that she showed up. I'll let you know, Ellen, I've reached out to her now because now I know her Twitter handle for Lois. We're talking. Okay. We might have her on. Hey, Gov Krupp. Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern, Canada, the Week in Review, breaking down Clown World as it unfolds. So now that we don't have circuses, this is a circus. So thank you very much, Gov. And let's make sure at the end you also get another chance to say that. I'll star this. And then Railroaded, couple more, and then we're going to go straight to Cory. I can't type quick. Shoulder recovery, man. Great chance, Jason. Keep it up. Yeah, Charlie, you're awesome. Thank you. And I don't know, we'll do a veteran thing or something soon. Yeah, let's think about that. Railroaded, I am swamped. I'm in a swamped month. Oh, got it. No guarantees anytime, any day right now. No worries. I'm here if I can be. Sometimes load, but in and out with people. So don't talk in chat. No worries. Cool, Railroaded, and I hope you're catching the replays when you can too, because there's a lot going on. I was going to ask you about your angel wings are today. No pick. Oh. And then Tammy, I'm good with the clown world. And then Charlie says, LOL Railroaded. All right, folks. He's here. He's ready. And I'm really intrigued. This is Cory Morgan. He works for the Western Standard, and he wrote a book about sovereignty. And we like that subject, and we want to learn about sovereignty. And he's also, of course, a reporter who's not part of the mainstream. He's definitely the alternate media, closer to independent media than mainstream. And we'll get into that too, to see how independent media fits into this world, whether or not we can contribute or whether or not we're in the way. But I'm curious on how independent journalists kind of fit into this new world. And I think Cory is going to be able to bring that to us. So, Cory, without further ado, welcome to the stream.
Hey, glad to be here.
Hey, nice to see you. So you got some dogs upstairs, so we'll let everybody know that if we hear some barking, it's just the guys upstairs. They're just having some fun.
Yes, they're an active pair of hammerheads up there. They like to bark at the worst of times.
What kind of dogs do you have?
They're mutts. Well, one English bulldog. She's actually pretty quiet. And a couple of mutts we fostered and then, of course, failed and ended up adopting them. They're both large and weird and nice, but we're not quite sure what they are.
Cool. And Ellen kind of just called me out there. Did you start the Independence Party?
No, I mean, we're going far enough back. I started, the Alberta Independence Party back in 1999. It came and went. I sort of chaptered that in the book I wrote. And a new Alberta Independence Party was formed by Dave Borkman about 3 or 4 years ago, perhaps a little longer, even though more like 5 years ago. But there's a big gap in between.
Well, we've got the best chat. They know everything. So if you have anything else I don't know about, we're going to find out through them. Okay, so you're in Alberta. You're in Calgary. You born in Alberta? You came to Alberta? What was your start?
Yeah, well, I was born in Red Deer, raised in Banff, moved to Calgary after I graduated high school, and worked in the oil field for 20 years as a surveyor in exploration projects. Moved to Pritis, which is kind of just a little community just in the foothills outside of Calgary about 11 years ago. Still here now.
Oh, wonderful. So you're close enough to Calgary that you commute each day, or do you how do you work that?
Yeah, no, I get the best of everything. I'm only 10 minutes from the south side of the city, actually, if I drive straight. Yet at the same time, I walk out my backyard and my acreage, and I've got bears and deer and all the good stuff as if I wasn't in the city. So it's perfect.
That's awesome. So the Alberta Independence Party, was that your first foray into politics, or was that something you kind of stumbled into after getting into it?
Yeah, I was a political dork right from a young age. So I ended up joining the Reform Party. I bought a membership off of this little old man at the Calgary Stampede, and I think it was 1989, so I would have been 18 years old. And I was fascinated. This guy's talking to me, and he's got an interesting message, and that was actually Preston Manning. And
Oh,
that's
get out.
the the early days of the Reform Party. And like any other party, he was working the ground. He was out there in this booth alone until some volunteers came about. And once I was sold that one little card, I was just hooked. Well, what do I do now? Well, you can go to a local EDA meeting. You can volunteer for a campaign. You can get a bunch of junk mail. There's all sorts of things. I just basically got involved in politics on the federal and provincial levels obsessively all the way through my 20s until I hit a frustration point at the end of my 20s when I started the Alberta Independence Party.
Sorry, until you got frustrated at the end of your 20s, and then you started the Alberta Independence Party?
That's right.
Okay.
It's quite a story. I was with kind of a smaller party. It was called the Alberta Party. That party still exists, but it got taken over by a bunch of leftists in the last 10 years or so. But it actually was a very conservative party back in the 90s. It was formed by a former elected senator, Stan Waters. And we were kind of, I guess, the alternative right-wing party in Alberta. I mean, going against Ralph Klein, in other words, we didn't make a heck of a lot of headway, but it still taught me about political organizing. I was on the board with that party, how to do the functioning of a party constitution, all that good stuff. And but still, we were spinning our wheels, and with the Chrétien, the way he was treating Alberta, I felt Alberta was spinning its wheels. Ralph Klein was. So it's time to get something rolling, and I basically broke away from the Alberta Party with a few of the other board members, and we formed the Alberta Independence Party, and that sort of started me down the independence road that I'm still on today.
So Chrétien and Klein were, in power, but what was the issue that kind of got you involved? Like, was there an actual issue at the time that kind of got your interest?
There was a couple. The one that actually really put me over, well, actually, there was an issue that made the Alberta Independence Party sort of explode onto the scene, but there's the issue that made me decide it was time for an independence party. So I'll start with that. Ironically, I'm quite socially liberal. And people who follow me on Twitter know, I mean, I've got no use for some of the extreme lunatics on the social left, but in general, I don't care. Gay people get married, whatever. It's all good with me. I'm not my concern. But a problem I had was with the Dillwyn Vreend case. So I'm kind of going back. Not everybody would remember this, but he was an instructor at a college in Alberta, and he got fired for being gay, which is kind of unimaginable now. But back in the 90s, you could do that. There were no protections or anything in place. And he took that all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that Alberta had to read in and write in sexual orientation rights into the Alberta Charter of Rights.
Okay.
And that's what infuriated me. And it wasn't that they were going into the Charter or the Alberta Bill of Rights. I'm fine with that. But that's for us to do, not for you guys.
That's right.
That's the problem. It's more like, kiss my ass, get out of here, leave us alone, and we'll do this ourselves. But
so it wasn't the Alberta court, it went all the way to the Supreme Court.
That's right.
Wow,
so, and Ralph Klein postured with the notwithstanding clause and things, but eventually backed down. And again, I didn't have a beef with protections for people who were gay or anything. I just didn't like the way the chain of authority went. I mean, that was the provincial autonomy was stepped on. That should be our own decision to make. So that brought me there. That's what got me looking at the system and looking at what can Alberta do, though? What can Saskatchewan do? What can BC do if they're ever actually in a large conflict or clash with Ottawa? And you know what? They really can't do a bloody thing. We are subservient in this country in a lot of ways, and we don't have a lot of remedies if there is a conflict. In the end, it's a very centralized form of government.
Yep.
At the same time as well, we were seeing the Reform Party starting to water itself down. It was going into the Canadian Alliance. It was no longer a Western party. Now it was trying to take Ontario seats. And it just feels like we're going in the same circle over and over again. And it certainly does today. Nothing against Stockwell Day, who was leading it back then, and then Stephen Harper, later with the merge things. But what did they do for the West once they got in? They weren't bad to us, but that's the best we can hope for. We can hope for a government that's less bad than the others.
Right. No, so like neutral.
No government that caters to the West federally, or no party is going to win government. It won't happen. And it's not a personal thing. It's math. It's just the way our system is built. So the thoughts start going through my mind. I mean, again, I was a political dork. I was watching things. So Charlottetown, Meech Lake. I mean, I'm going back for any younger viewers or listeners, but those were attempts to change the Canadian Constitution, which I feel is fundamentally flawed. And those failed. They didn't even come close to passing. And when you look at the formula to change or revise the Constitution, it's pretty much impossible. It's not going to happen. So, what kind of catalyst would it take to either draft a whole new deal for an independent West, or at least bring about the impetus to write a new deal for the entire Confederation? And I
Right.
couldn't see any other path aside from a province either being on the brink of actually seceding or actually having seceded, and then you can perhaps renegotiate from there.
So Quebec was kicking up about a bunch of dust at this time. Were you paying
Mm-hmm.
attention there and wondering why are they getting that attention and we're not?
Well, I mean, their independence movement is a lot better established. They came within 1% of actually going in a referenda. Uh, in Alberta and in Saskatchewan, in the West in general, our independence movements fail. I mean, we
Hmm.
talk loud, we poll high. Sometimes, currently, I read a Globe and Mail article recently that was saying the independence movement's dead. It's only at 19% support in Alberta right now. That's 1 in 5 Albertans, one out of
That's
the
a
country. That's
lot.
pretty bloody high, actually. That's a
Hmm.
pretty substantial base. And it rises issue by issue, and it's been as high as perhaps even 30-40%, but it comes back down again, and no cohesive movement ever comes of it. And that's where, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but where I realized like we've just been doing it wrong. We're different circumstances. Quebec is much different. They've got it's more of a cultural and, of course, linguistic thing with them. In the West, it's more about individual autonomy and economics, which doesn't bind as well as a cultural binding does. It's just the way it is. And it allows us to be easily pacified when the circumstances change. And we tend to forget that it's the system that's broken, not the party that's in power. But once the party
Right.
changes, we kind of, oh, we don't need to do anything now. We let it go. But we look in this last provincial election, though, we keep forming these independence parties. I formed one, others have formed them, and they all fail. This last election was brutal, and none of them even came close to breaking 1%.
Yeah.
So we've got to change our approach to build if we're looking to get towards sovereignty and independence.
I get the impression though that we would be good to do that if there was a strong party or a strong candidate or really a strong push. Like we would do it if there was a chance that it wasn't going to go NDP or Liberal. Is that the feeling you get as well? Like if we had really had a strong option, maybe we would do it.
No, I don't think so. I think
No.
we would do better. I mean, the fear of a vote split, this turned into a two-party race in Alberta. There was no doubt about it.
Yeah.
There was just no room for anybody else to take any oxygen up. Uh, but I mean, we've had other elections prior with independence options, and in the days when we assumed and when it looked like you could split the conservative vote in Alberta three ways, you weren't going to get NDP. So it wasn't a fear factor, but it's a matter of organizing uh, and building it into something that can hold together and garner the faith of the voters. And parties, again, I go at it at length in the book. These are the things I learned. I ran for the Alberta Independence Party, of course, when I led it in
Hmm.
2000. We did all right. I mean, 8-10% where we had people and things like that. Then I ran for the Separation Party of Alberta in 2004. And I thought, what we need is a more direct, a more open and outright saying it's right in the name of the party. I didn't lead that one, but
Right.
I ran for it. We got slaughtered. Uh, the problem is with the party is as soon as you have independence in its mandate, it becomes a single issue party, whether you want to or not. You can have the best policies for health in the world or
Hmm.
education or all the other things people talk about, but nobody's going to talk about it because you have independence or secession in your name, and then that's what you're stuck with, and you don't get votes that way. So you
Right.
have to build the movement without it being in a party, and that's where we look more towards organizing on the ground for a referenda, which is critical eventually at some point, and getting independence friendly politicians into office,
Hmm.
but not with a party that has independence as its actual mandate, because it'll destroy it in the electorate. It just can't push through that way. I mean, even the in Quebec, they don't call the Bloc Québécois the Quebec Independence Party, or the Parti Québécois. Same thing. They're very certainly focused on their pride and local names, but they don't wear that on their sleeve. And independence parties do in the West, and it limits them, and they just can't get over the line doing that way. So we could better direct our resources.
Now, do you think independent candidates have a chance on a federal level of not being party aligned, maybe a riding level? Do you think there's a better chance to switch one or two?
It's really darn hard, not impossible. I'm trying to remember when the last one. John Nunziata pulled it off once, but again, he'd been sitting as a liberal MP before that happened. Unfortunately, I wish we'd have more independent candidates. I mean, I really do, but the party system is so intrinsic, you can't break away from it, and it's hard to get steam and momentum with the voters. It's been done, but it's darn tough. The candidate has to have, of course, a good campaign, a good degree of local profile. Whoever they're running against has to have frustrated the voters for some reason or another, or at least their party did. But it's a tough road to hoe. I mean, it makes progress, and it allows people to vote for something outside of the standard ones, and independent candidates or other. I ran for the Libertarian Party federally once. I knew I wasn't going to win the seat, but I could go to the forums and I could smack down on the Conservative MP for his stance on supply management, and I could bring some issues to the fore that they wouldn't have talked about in that election if I wasn't in there stirring it up. So there's a purpose for all of these candidates, but the chances of winning are tough. Not impossible, but darn tough.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Like, the purpose of an independent is to raise the issues, the ones that nobody else will talk about. And it's odd that people don't see how valuable that would be in the House. Like, forget about the debate stage.
I know.
But in the House, that canary in that coal mine would be kind of valuable.
Oh, ideally, it would be brilliant. I love to see. I mean, I work closely with Derek Fildebrand. He founded the Western Standard. When he was in the legislature with the UCP, and you'd be the first to admit, he made some screw ups. There were problems, and he ended up finding himself out as an independent MLA. But as an independent MLA, he was one of the more effective there for his final year than he was when he was with the party, because he wasn't afraid of swatting at any of them if they ticked him off. Right. I mean, he would bring it up issue by issue, not what the party tells him what to do. So independent elected representatives are fantastic, but it's just hard to get them in there or keep them in there for that matter.
Well, that sounds like it might be the machine, the single party system we have, really. We say two, but there's really just one. They just take turns.
Yeah, and it gets back to, again, the frustrations I have. I mean, what leads me to being a sovereignty supporter, an independent supporter, is recognizing the system itself doesn't serve us well. We need to reevaluate and rebuild, in my view, gut and rebuild the system, whether it's one province or 3 provinces or the entire country, if that could happen eventually. But this current system, I mean, it's not the worst system on earth, but it's far, far from the best. And the fact that it can't be substantively changed, that's really problematic.
And I think some of the challenge we may have as Alberta is we're really strong on a provincial level, but we still send a whole bunch of Conservatives to represent us. And we don't really do much with that. We don't change them. It's really a lot of blue. And it's kind of like the Toronto Maple Leafs. They really don't have to win. They're going to keep selling out every year anyways. They don't have to get that cup. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. So if we're really serious about sovereignty and independence, why not send independent MPs to go and represent us instead of being federally party aligned? Like, because we're going to have to fight that fight too.
Yeah, it's because we can't get them elected. Like, there's wanting to get them in versus actually managing to. I spoke at the Maverick Party's AGM a couple of weeks ago. Great bunch of people, and they're working hard at it. And their concept is to be, and again, not an independence party, but at least a unapologetic Western party. They're going to sit as the Reform did when they have it in their mandate. We won't change and go to Ontario, and we'll keep that as our top priority. Maybe they can morph into something that will start getting some seats won. We'll see. As something I've said before, it's not when Liberals screw the West that people vote for change out here. We expect the Liberals to do it. It's when the Conservatives screw the West that we get some changes. It was when Mulroney did the CF-18 contract that he gave to Quebec when Manitoba had a far superior bid. And when it drives it crystal clear home to Western voters that these Conservative politicians will throw us under the bus just as quickly as the Liberal ones will. They'll just be friendlier when they do it. And that's what created the Reform Party. That's what makes people start to look at new options. So it's almost like in an imaginary scenario, almost what we need to see is Poilievre get in for people to realize he won't change anything. That's when they'll realize. That's when they say, holy cow, we've got to do something different. And it's like we have to fail first before we try something else. Unfortunately, we've done this failure before. Much like we have to repeat the failure because now that was a generation ago and people forgot.
We forgot about it. So get Pierre in 2025. He doesn't do great. Danielle says, I'm handcuffed. I can't do great. And then maybe there's some room for change.
Yes, definitely, and the room for change. Like I see things that are promising. I don't lack optimism.
Hmm.
I push for independence. If people look at the Clarity Act, it's interesting. You know, the excuse the Liberals gave for Quebec being within 1% of separating back in the mid '90s uh, was that they said the question was unclear and the Quebecers didn't know what they were voting for. And no, that's not true. They knew exactly what they were voting. That campaign was going on for months. They knew it was a yes and no question, and it really did come that close. I see one of your commenters saying, you know, why would Quebec want to separate? It gets everything it wants. Uh, you have to understand Quebecers think of it differently, though. I met with members of the Bloc Québécois uh, back when I led the Alberta Independence Party. They sent actually some out to chat with me because they were fascinated with the Western independence movement rising up. And I got to learn about them. They don't care about the finances, not the true independence minded ones out there. They don't care about the money. They don't care about, they know that they get transfer payments in, they know
Hmm.
they get preferential treatment. They want their own French nation and they will stop at nothing to get it. And that's all that matters to them. So I sort of lost where I went on my tangent with all of that, but
No problem, but I can bring it back to Quebec because
sure.
this chat or this chatter is actually in Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, why does Alberta not leverage Quebec and support its push for separation? I
Yeah.
think once 2 or 3 provinces start pushing for this, we can really rein in Ottawa's power. Is it a tag team type of thing? Hit them from the left, hit them from the right, east, west, and
Oh,
get them.
I 100% absolutely agree. Yes, we should. The term when I met with it was Richard Marceau who came out here from he was with the Bloc back then was hammer and anvil. I mean, if we could get independence movements on each side of Ontario, smacking them in the middle, we're going to get their attention whether
Hmm.
they like it or not, and we can make some real change. Yeah, we shouldn't be getting upset with Quebec's independence movement. We should be feeding it. uh, it, it,
Absolutely.
it benefits us all. We need to shake this tree, and they're closer to being able to do that than we are. But we should still be working towards it. Oh yeah, that's what I was getting towards was the Clarity Act.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
but what they did, then the government said we're going to create this act and we're going to say these are the steps that are required for a province if they want out. Now they knew they couldn't legislate to say there's no path, or that would infuriate Quebec so much that there'd be a positive vote the next year. But they said, yeah, you have to have a clear question and there has to be a clear majority in the vote. But then after that, it says the country is obligated to negotiate the independence of that province in good faith. So they created the path for us. That applies to Alberta
Hmm.
just as well as Saskatchewan or BC or Manitoba. We have the means. So what we need is a referendum. And it doesn't really matter which party is in. We need the ability for the citizens to initiate it and for it to be binding. And that's two big things. And none of us have those
Yeah.
abilities right now as it is. Alberta's got fake referendum legislation. Jason Kenney made it as a bait and switch. You can't reach the bar. And it's not really that binding. But I
Hmm.
do think with Daniel Smith, we do have somebody who's more receptive than anybody's ever been to maybe reform that legislation, fix it, make it achievable, make it like Switzerland, make it like even California. You can get initiatives on a ballot, citizens can, and the government will be bound by them. And then it's a case of building that ground support. And that goes into a lot of what my book is about. Get the people on the ground supporting the independence. And if they've got the means with the referendum, they will vote for it. Separate the party from it. You need friendly people in parties because if you don't have them, you'll never get the referendum legislation.
Hmm.
But don't take the suicidal route of taking the party into an independence party. Have independence movements instead, and have independence individuals, and work towards it. The other thing is don't, and I have a whole chapter on that. Don't hold a referendum too early. I've seen a few politicians, ones I like, are people saying we need a referendum as soon as possible. Paul Hinman was saying that, or some others were saying, no. If we want to set this back 15 years, hold a referendum and get 20%. That'll do it. You're not going to get another one for a long time. That's what Quebec learned as well. I mean, they still want to go, but they're not going to initiate another one until they're 100% sure it's going to pass with a good 60% support at least or something. We have to think the same way. We've got to get this. So there's a lot of work and there's some years ahead of us, but we need to build that framework. You need to build that base of support and build the legislative mechanism so we can trigger them when the time comes. And the time will come. because the system's broken. It's going to make it come. I mean, when times get hard enough, people really start to examine new means to change things.
I'm wondering if the transfer payments are like the finger in the dam and it's just holding it all back. And if those stopped, Quebec may not be so willing to continue with this whole unity thing. What do you think? If those stopped, if we stopped doing that, maybe that can start that domino?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the financial incentives still, I mean, impact a lot of Quebecers as to why they would stay within Canada. I mean, the true secessionists among them want gone no matter what. But as long as they're
Right.
getting the money in, they're not as hot and heavy to go. But if they lose that, there's going to be some of them. Well, hell, I'm not hanging around this any longer. I want out. And a lot of people don't realize how preferential everything is in feeding Quebec, whether it's the hiring of civil servants. I mean, we look at equalization all the time because it's so blatant and exactly what it is. It's a wealth redistribution between provinces, but you have all sorts of transfer payments. We get hooped on CPP, we get hooped on EI, we get hooped on subsidies to local businesses. That place just sucks in so much. So if they weren't getting that, yeah, I kind of feel they'd be looking at it a lot differently.
And it might push the conversation so we all go back to the table and maybe talk about a different way to do it. If it's not transfer payments, maybe we all have our own economies and we can lend to each other and do that kind of stuff. But maybe it might be a way to ignite that conversation a bit further. I was chatting with Rob Anders earlier this week, and I was asking him, how do we get Danielle, like what's Danielle's first move if she really thinks sovereignty is something that we should have? And he said, take back taxation. Make sure that we control that. That's what Quebec does. Would you agree with that, or is there another first step?
No, that's among them. If we remember going all the way back to the Alberta agenda that called for that, that was written by Stephen Harper and Ken Bosencool and Cooper and a few other political scientists, Andy Crooks. One of the things they called for was taking the ability to tax. I think the priority in the Alberta agenda goals, I mean, I don't know if any one has to be first, but we need to start pursuing one of them and pursuing it vigorously. So whether it's that or whether it's a provincial pension plan, because we really get badly abused with the pension system due to our demographics and that. And I think that can be sold and we can change it. Quebec has their own, they're fine. Or even starting in what I still see as baby steps, really starting to embrace the provincial police force.
Yes.
But these are all local things we can do. Other provinces are already doing. We got to start making that case to the country. When we bring about an Alberta pension plan, and people get on Smith's case and say she's being unreasonable, disloyal, nasty, this and that, she could say, look, no, Quebec's doing it. If they're not villains for doing it, there's no reason at all that Alberta shouldn't be able to do it, or Saskatchewan for that matter, or any other province. So drawing those lines in the sand and asserting ourselves works two ways. For one, it does start moving us towards that door with different policies and taking away those question marks. When people are thinking of voting in a referendum, well, the pension question mark's gone. The collection of the taxes question mark's gone. The police force question mark are gone. You're a lot more inclined to get towards that vote. Plus, those will help provoke the battles. And it'll show Albertans on how unfair it is. We're not asking for anything that other provinces aren't already doing. So why are we assholes when we do it? And the other ones are okay. So I'm hoping Premier Smith really takes one of those on and hits hard on it.
Now, you're familiar with Section 91 and 92 of the Constitution, right?
Refresh me on. I'm not good with the numbers in that.
91 is the federal powers in jurisdiction, and 92 are the provincial powers in jurisdiction.
Yes,
and
these resources.
Yeah. And so why is it that we as a province and basically all the other ones are absolutely willing to just not push the actual rules we already have, the laws we already have? We should be doing our own resources. We should be doing our own healthcare. What happened? Like, why are we so passive?
Because we've let ourselves get so dependent on the government transferring our own money back to us that we're terrified of stirring them up. Like you mentioned with healthcare. Well, I mean, actually, if the original Health Insurance Act said that the federal government was supposed to cover half of the healthcare while the province administers it. And right now, the federal government covers about, I think, 17% or less. But that's still a big chunk of the budget. Healthcare budgets are massive. I mean, it's a broken system. We're pouring in, it's in a black hole we can pour money into. And no province, no premier wants to get in the situation to say, we're going to change the system. We're going to stand up to Ottawa. We're going to change that. And then Ottawa says, fine, but we're going to cut $10 billion from your health transfer. Unfortunately, it puts the premier in a very politically untenable position. that looks bad. And I mean, even though the villain is Ottawa,
Yeah, I was about to say the
uh,
retaliatory measure doesn't matter.
yeah, well, we part of the deal with the Alberta agenda when Harper and the rest drafted it was Alberta was doing well for oil revenue and everything else, saying we can afford to have them cut our transfers and tell them to go to hell. We'll run
Hmm.
our own system,
Right.
but we would have to take that kind of beating, and they're interspersed with it. They toss us those loaded poison pill policies all the time. Likewise with the daycare. That was another one. Well, if you don't take it, we're going to give this many billions to it. If you refuse to, fine. And then the premier looks like the jerk, saying, "Well, I'm refusing to, allow all these young parents to get subsidized daycare because they turned away billions of dollars from Ottawa." It's an ugly. Again, it's that system. It really allows them to make provincial leaders dance like puppets for them, and we really start to need to take back our own powers.
Just to kind of describe this in a different way, when Canada started off, we were a bunch of children, the provinces, and we kind of needed parents. We'll just call the parents Montreal and Toronto or Ottawa, but Ottawa and Montreal. And over time, as we're growing up, we were heading west, building up the population, and really starting to grow up like children. It feels like we're at the point where now our parents are taking our paycheck from our job and saying, "Hey, you want to keep the house above your head, and hey, you want us to watch your kids, and hey, you want us to keep food in your fridge, and you want us to keep this easy for you, then you have to continue to let us take your paycheck and give you an allowance. Why don't we grow up and just move out and say, okay, well, it's going to be tough for a couple of years as we set up our apartment, but we need to have a family here. We need to take care of ourselves here." I know it's a weird way to look at it, but it kind of sounds like it because we're getting allowance for healthcare out of the government when we actually paid for it, and we're being told what we can and can't do, including with our children, when we know what we need to do. What do you think about that?
No, it's a great analogy, and I go back a bit into the formation of the country. When Confederation began, the West made up 5% of the population, so it
Hmm.
really wasn't a big consideration for the people drafting what was going to be the agreement that governed this country.
Correct.
This was just an area full of resources to be, exploited and to feed central Canada, where everything happens and where the population is, and as people are just inclined to being, self-centered in that sense.
Hmm.
And the system was built that way, but the system's still built that way. That's
Right.
the problem.
We've grown up. We're at home now with our own kids
Yeah,
under the house.
we make up, with Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba is getting closer into 40% of the population now, but we're still being treated as if we're the child over in the corner, and
Yep.
it's not serving us well. But again, it's systemic, right? It's the Constitution. And it's attitude. I mean, we've got these entitled. We see the term Laurentian elites. These ones
Hmm.
who were born in the Laurentian Valley, whether it's in Quebec or Ontario, but they feel entitled to be the ones governing. It's almost a form of aristocracy, and it's entrenched. If you've spent time in Ottawa, you get to see that with some of these guys. The West is different. You get the rich aristocrats out there. You get the oil heads and ones, at least the way they used to be. That's new money. That's why they're the ones who shake things up. That's why they're different, and we are different. Uh, but yeah, we're the kids who are ready for some independence, and let us out of the basement. And yeah, if we fall on our face, so be it. But let us go.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't ask for permission to leave my home. I
Hmm.
just left, and I came back at Christmas and Thanksgiving. I didn't really ask for permission. I was old enough. Whether it was a mistake or not, I still did it. And I'm wondering why are we asking? Like, why
Well,
can't we
yeah,
just say, "Hey, look, here are the rules, here's the Constitution, and let's just stick to it."
yeah. Well, and we don't have the public support to just outright leave, but we can start the incremental moves. That's for sure. I think of it whether it's somebody moving out or somebody moving in. I think of one ex girlfriend from many years ago. Every time she'd visit, she'd leave one more item in the house, and somehow a few months later, I realized she lives with me. Uh,
Nah, and some dogs upstairs now.
well, that was a different one, but anyway,
Okay, okay.
it was a long time ago. But there's a frog in water approach, little things,
Yeah.
and they do change, and we can start taking those little things, as we said, with our taking more control of our healthcare.
Hmm.
Uh, EI, that's something the provinces can take over as well. Actually, there's no reason we don't have to. It's just that no other province is doing it yet.
Mm.
CPP, police force, and collecting. Now, there is some misconception on the collecting of the taxes. At least as far as it goes. Like in Quebec, the bottom line is, and that's how some people argue about it, what it really is just that in Quebec you do two forms instead of having it in one form and then getting them to split it and send it back. And so you fill out your one federal one and your one provincial one, and you deal with Ottawa and you deal with the province.
Right. So the provincial never leaves, and it stays in the province.
Yeah, and but it doesn't totally change things too terribly much. But what it does do is give the person filling out that text form the realization, that separation. This is them. This is ours. This is the money that's going out of my wallet to Ottawa. This is the money that's staying here in Alberta or Saskatchewan or wherever. So a lot of it's symbolic, but also it allows you to build the structure. Again, that's getting that foot out the door. Now you've got, because some people say, well, it's wasteful. You're duplicating services. Yeah, I know. But if we eventually throw one of them out, we'll be back to one, and it'll be a provincial one. So we would have our own, revenue agency that's dealing with that collection of taxes. That's the advantage of that. That's stepping towards the door, moving on out. So there's merit in those moves, and every one of them are going to be fought. But hopefully, Smith is the one who's finally going to have the courage to start moving towards some of these things.
I hope so. Now, what about low-hanging fruit, like little easy things like getting rid of federally appointed judges, and we appoint our own? Maybe start there. We look at the police force. Is that really a big change for us? Maybe we can look at rejecting certain part of the healthcare system, maybe maids or something else, or we hold back on parts of it, or we kind of treat it like the States, where we set our own rules and what we want to do when it comes to like maids and other issues on the healthcare side, and just do it. What would Ottawa do? Would they, like you said, hold back $10 billion in payments? Like if we said we're not gonna allow maids and we're gonna create a law because there are no laws. If we create a law and say we don't do that here, what do you think Ottawa would do?
Yeah, well, they would cut our health transfer. We saw that before, and that was some of the battles that were happening with Ralph Klein and Jacques Chrétien back in the 90s when Klein was allowing private MRI clinics to operate in Alberta. And it was driving Ottawa bananas. And they said, well, fine, we're going to cut your transfers. And they did. And, we had a good parallel going on because we had Romano over in Saskatchewan. He was sticking to the letter of the law, absolutely publicly funded or, publicly owned diagnostics only. We were not allowing any private because he was NDP. He was a pragmatic NDP leader, but he was still NDP. The wait for an MRI in Saskatchewan ended up peaking at, I believe, 22 months. I mean, if you've got a dire physical condition you need diagnosed, there's a lot of them that they're going to kill you long before you even got diagnosed at that rate. Whereas Alberta, under Klein, knocked that down, I believe, to about 90 days in the public system. But it's because he allowed private operators and people could pay to jump the line, which you still can to this day. But the government's not punishing us for those anymore. But that battle was going on in the 90s. And we can take on those kinds of battles, whether it's MAID or more diagnostics or more private healthcare in general. But we've got to stand up for ourselves. The premier has to get up and give the middle finger to the prime minister and say, we're doing this, get over it, get stuffed. One of the brilliant things, and I don't give him a lot of credit because I got on his case a lot eventually, was what Kenny did. But with the Enoch Reserve west of Edmonton, they're building a private, basically hospital. I think it's for orthopedic surgeries.
Okay.
And it'll be operating, taking people with the public system, but operating in a private profit environment on the Enoch Reserve. And I don't know how many times I tweeted at Rachel Notley, are you going to promise to shut down that private hospital west of Edmonton? And of course, you just get crickets out of her because she's terrified because nobody's going to take on a First Nation business.
Right.
Even though that's perhaps even running contrary to the Health Act, they're terrified of them. So start doing more of that. I wouldn't mind seeing a private, I went and had a colonoscopy done in a hospital a while back. I freaked everybody out and put the pictures on Twitter of it because that's just my gross nature. But it's waste. It was an interesting, efficient clinic, but it was in a hospital. Why does that have to be in a hospital? It's a specialty. Why can't that be in a mini mall with a private group running it, where they would probably do it a heck of a lot better, and it would free up the space in the hospitals? Because premiers are too terrified of unions to start diversifying healthcare out that way. and they're
Hmm.
terrified of the federal government cutting transfers. So again, if the premier's ready for the fight, start doing some of that. Start bringing these fights on, and as long as you communicate to the Albertans and realize this is for us, guys, it's for our own good. So yes, those jerks, they cut it $5 billion, and then we're going to have to make it up through our own revenues. But I tell you that support for independence is going to be ratcheting up as these battles continue as well. So bring it on. That's what I mean with having an independence-friendly government, but not being an independence party. They
Right.
can do a lot of these things without dealing with that nuclear level of where it eventually will end. But it's important to have MLAs who are supportive of that sort of thing, even if that's not what they're wearing on their sleeve. And I'm not saying they'd be secretive, but I'm just saying you get
Hmm.
people of that mindset in there. And it depends on which battle. The other thing I guess that the premier shouldn't do is take on 20 battles at once. If you
Right.
if you got too much going on at the same time, you're probably going to fail. So find a few targets you can hit, whether it's in the healthcare, whether it's the taxation, or one of those elements, and hit it hard, and hit it properly.
Well, I was talking with Maxime Bernier, and he said if he wins in Manitoba, the first private member bill he'll bring forward is a ban or criminalizing late-term abortion. Now, when you poll people and you ask them about it, and you tell them what late-term abortion is, they're not for it. Majority of Canadians are not for that. Like, they don't really know. But if asked, they're not for it. Now, Danielle, she could take that as a nice low-hanging fruit and just say, hey, look, we're going to define it here. And what it means is this is the criminal version of it. Mother's health, baby health, those are exceptions. But anything else, really, we're going to criminalize it here. Now, the argument could be made. The other side says they're only done for emergency situations. Okay, nobody will be charged. But Alberta at least will take a stand and say, hey, we're going to ban late-term abortion. We don't have those here. Even if it's just a message because they still have for mothers and babies' health. Why couldn't she just grab that? Now, when I asked Rob that question, because he was roommates with her, with Danielle, he said she will not touch that subject. Just will not. And now I'm confused. Conservative, no real pushback. There's a lot of support for that particular item. But is it because it opens up that door, opens up that conversation, and then it will scare everybody to think we'll just keep pushing? Or does she not touch that for other reasons?
I think the reason she wouldn't touch it, if she wouldn't, and I think Rob's probably right, is the political blowback. It's a really tough hornet's nest to poke. And when you
Mm-hmm.
reason with people, left-leaning Scandinavian countries do not allow late-term abortions. They
Yeah.
have laws about this. Unless the baby is going to threaten the life of the mother, once you've carried that for a couple of trimesters, you're committed. That's just the way it goes. And the case can be made, but it's a tough case.
Mm-hmm.
And they've really turned abortion into such a sacred cow. They really have.
Yeah.
That as you said, already, the fear and to play devil's advocate. If I was in Rachel Notley's shoes, I would say, there you go. That's that first step before they're going to
That's
ban
right.
it altogether.
And
They
that
are
would be
going to
the
wipe it out.
argument.
They're
Yeah.
getting the foot in the door, and
Yeah.
it will scare a lot of people, and it will crater the female vote. I hate to say it.
Yeah, no, she'll call it forced motherhood, and then that's the way she'll go with that for sure.
Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, so it's not a principle thing, I think, so much, but it's horrible because just the concept of a late term abortion is horrible. But politically, it's just such a killer, just a killer to take on. I don't
Mhm.
I don't see her diving into that one.
No, me either. Well, Kenny tried with mandates and then had to pedal that back. Can you imagine abortion? It would
Yeah,
be way worse, right? Like, I get it, but I kind of think, well, that's why you do it, because it's going to be so hard and because it's going to get a lot of people really paying attention to it. That's why you do it. I do see the blowback, but what I keep hearing from you, and I see as well, is we're acting immature on a political level. They're going to retaliate if we do that. And if we push hard here, I'm worried about that. And we're not going to talk about that hospital, which is breaking the laws, because it's got too much other things associated with it. It's going to look bad to us. It doesn't sound like we have like mature leaders. Am I being too sensitive on this one?
I don't know about mature is the right term, but courageous, perhaps. Like you've got to be able to take the stand and hold it and defend it and
Mhm.
carry it without bending. And they are prone to bending, so a lot of them will avoid the battle in the first place.
Mhm.
Uh, taking on, and I know for people very committed that are horrified with the status of completely unregulated abortion in Canada. They don't want to wait any longer to see change. As the commenter here saying, infanticide, is horrendous, absolutely. But you got to pick your winnable battles. It's not to say it can never be won, but maybe it shouldn't be the first one to dive into. Let her get up and win a couple of battles first. Get some other victories under your belt. Learn how to put them on the run. Learn how to defend a controversial policy.
Well, I got one for you. Go ahead.
I was pretty much done there. Just start those steps, and then maybe once you've gotten better, you're ready to take on a really tough one.
Now, she talked like crazy during the leadership campaigning, not the election campaigning, but the leadership campaigning, that she was going to do something about WEF and their involvement with like the Alberta Health Services. That partnership is still there. Now, there's a comment here that says, did AHS actually cut ties with WEF? Hooch, no, I looked when Rob was on. So on Monday, if you go back to the Monday video, I pulled up the Alberta Health Services website. The partnership is still on. It's still there. What happened with that one? Why can't she come in with that low-hanging fruit? Because there's a lot of support that if people understand who the WEF is and why they're meddling with their health services, she should be able to pull that partnership out. But no.
I think she might still. But we got to get on her case.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, we get so cynical, it's always down, and fair enough. I believe it when I see it scenario. But I mean, I do believe she sees the conflict, and she was as annoyed as the rest of us. Like, why on earth is this foreign, nasty organization tied to any provincial agency in any sort of way? I mean, it's just ridiculous. We have absolutely no need to be partnered with them on any level. She wasn't afraid of firing the board of the Alberta Health Services and starting to dig into, because there's a morass going on in there. That whole bureaucracy is sick and corrupted and wrong in just many, many ways. I would hope that the WEF tie is just one among many, many things she wants to flush and get in there and start stirring. Something that's changed now, finally. She's won an election. It's not a huge majority, but she's won a majority. And the naysayers in caucus, it's like, we got 4 years to work with now. So we can do some stuff. Don't get your cold feet because you're facing the electorate in a few months or a few weeks or anything like that. Now is the time to act if we're actually going to do anything. And again, I don't know. I just hope that she's going to be ready to take some of that on. I mean, her greatest strength is her greatest weakness. She's impulsive. She's not afraid of getting in. And unfortunately, sometimes it means she makes bad decisions like her floor crossing. But she could also make some really good ones. Just say, to hell with it, damn the torpedoes, let's go and let's have it out. Because we haven't had a leader who's such a kind of a loose cannon like that in a while. And I think we kind of need a loose cannon. But, a loose cannon can also blow itself up if it's not careful.
Right. Take a lot of toes with it as well.
Yeah.
Now, when she was giving her her victory speech for the leadership. Okay, look, I'm paying very close attention. I've been on this WEF thing before it was cool, right? Before the cool kids jumped on it. And ESG scores. This is the corporation's social credit scores. This is how corporations are being handled through access to capital in the capital markets, through partners and deals with other organizations. They actually go, okay, well, I'm going to do a deal with this automotive company. What's their ESG score? And if it's not good enough, they may go to the other one. It's quite the way to control corporations right now. My concern was when she was saying, hey, Kenny, you did some good things. The one thing she said was, and I'm very proud of the way you implemented ESG scores. Does she not know that is a WEF initiative? Does she not know that is not a good thing? Like, I don't mind that she said, hey, look, I looked at some of his things. I'm not sure what they are, but that was good. Or are we kind of getting mixed messages here?
I guess you're getting mixed messages. These are questions you would have to ask her. I know I'm not afraid of speculating on what she's thinking of. But because I mean, I speaking for myself, ESG is a vile concept. It's completely opposed to the whole basis of a free and capitalistic society. And it's not going to change with government, though. The thing that needs to change is shareholders revolting. I mean, and they will, I think, eventually. And we've seen a few examples of it. if they aren't getting a return on their investment, they're finally going to go to the board and say, take your ESG and shove it up your ass. I want a return, or I'm selling my shares. I'm out.
Sure,
And
that's on the business level, but we have an ESG score for Alberta.
yeah, that's
like, because they're also controlling whether or not we have investors, whether or not they come here, and because of our ESG score, and because of our oil, and because of wildfires now matter.
And that's crap, and we got to start calling out that crap, and Smith has to call out that crap, and we've got to elect mayors who will call out that crap, because it's garbage, it's bullshit, and it's not true. I mean, they fed us that stuff with, say, the city of Calgary with the Calgary Economic Development. Oh, if we just push enough diversity and have enough bike lanes and have enough this crap and that crap, all the investors would come. And guess what? No, they don't.
No, they don't care about that.
Level. They look at the price of real estate if they're going to get employees out here. They're looking at a bottom line. So quit chasing this ESG virtue signaling garbage and give a good business climate, and the investment will come. We've seen that. The Alberta advantage, again, going back to Ralph, that was one of the things he talked about. That was how we drew investment into Alberta. And people forget, oil prices dropped down to $10 a barrel in the late 90s. They were in the toilet. I don't forget it because I was in the oil field and I almost went broke. I had no work. It shut things down. But the budget was still balanced. There's, things were getting done. And part of that was he cut the corporate taxes. He created a business climate saying, we're going to support you. We want you to flourish here. This is the Alberta advantage. You move here. This is a pro-business place where you can set up your head offices, because it wasn't just oil companies. It was starting to diversify the economic environment. And to hell with ESG. That wasn't the concept yet, but we need that concept now. We certainly do. Yeah, I don't want to hear those words out of Smith's mouth unless she's saying it's crap.
Yeah, everything else in that speech was fine except for that. And I was like, oh, no. Does she know? Because maybe she doesn't know. And I hope so. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, well, she speaks off the cuff, as I said. That's part of her appeal and part of her Achilles heel at the same time, right? Perhaps. I mean, I can only guess because I'm trying to maintain optimism. She's going to be the premier for a while. We haven't seen a disruptor like her in the premier's office for a long time. So, I know she's got voices coming at her ears from all directions all the time, telling her to moderate and back off and lighten up. And I'm hoping she's saying, no, I'm going to follow through with things as I need to. I mean, when she left radio, like she regained my respect. I was on the Wild Rose Party executive when she crossed the floor. I was
okay. So you were going to be mad. Yeah, you were mad.
I was livid. We didn't talk for years. The next time I talked to Smith was years later after I'd written multiple blog postings and things, just shredding her. She had me on as a guest on her radio show, and that's the first time we spoke again. Which was hardly not like we were never close friends, but we always knew each other and worked together in missions over the years. And so we were talking again. I was on the show more, and then she was on my show a number of times over the years. But okay, I softened up and I listened to her radio show, and I got over it. But what I really liked about when she left QR77 was she explained why. I mean, she could have just wrote it out. She'd still be a radio host there today with a pretty decent income and, a nice number of holidays and everything. But they were starting to tell her what she could say. They were starting to tell her who she could interview. They were trying to tell her what subjects she was allowed to cover. And she couldn't handle that. A weakling, and we see those in radio and media, will bow their heads down. The ones remaining on QR77 and 630 Ched these days, you see it, these dry, boring shows where their pussy's just too afraid to attack any sort of a controversial issue any longer. She was the last one, but she quit, and she let us know that's why she quit. And she categorized, she even showed some of the memos she was getting from the program directors telling her that she was going to have her guests parsed by other levels of the bureaucracy in the station and things like that before she could have one. So she's got some principles. She's got some backbone. She doesn't like being pushed around, which, again, can make her intractable and difficult to deal with as a premier. She was a pain in the ass to deal with as a leader of the Wild Rose Party when I was on the executive. She's certainly her own person. But it holds a whole lot of potential for her to do some good things too, I think.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with that scenario or that situation for her, but did she just quit, or did she try and fight them, reach the end, and then quit? Do you know?
With the radio? it was sort of a building thing. I mean, when she wrote all the times that built up, it's I think the main turning point for, if you remember with Kaylin Ford 4 years ago, she was like a star candidate for the UCP up in Mountain View. Very, very smart young lady. She's Oxford educated. I had her on my show. She intimidated the crap out of me. I mean, she's too smart for me. I had a hard time talking to her. She just really is brilliant and principled and quite something. And she'd had some people might have seen her documentary that recently came out. She had a stalker through the politics who got on her case, and he actually released snippets of conversations she had with him on Facebook, and he pulled them out of context.
Right.
And it made her look like a terrible racist. And he gave them to Press Progress and CBC and all this stuff. And right during the election, that all blew up. And she was labeled as, a white nationalist, and she is nothing of the sort. I can't imagine how hurtful it was for her to take all of that. No press would let her give her side. Nobody. Kenny turned on her. She was out of the race, out of the election. Ninchie was on her case. Notley was on her case. Nobody would give her. Danielle brought her on her show for a 40-minute interview and let Ford tell her side of the story. Well, the left went bananas, and they went after the station managers. They went after the sponsors. They went after the works. And the station managers pulled the show from the archives. They wiped it off of the memory of the show. They chastised Smith. They said, don't you dare have her on again or have anything like that again. Brett Wilson, same sort of thing. He pissed some people off. The program director said, you're not to have him on your show any longer. So it built up with her. I can imagine there was some degree of pushing back over that time, but you're still going to lose when it is your bosses. But that was the big turning point. Like, wow, this was an important interview, especially with the news that's coming up now. With Kaylin Ford, she's suing the crap out of CBC and the NDP and a whole bunch of people. And Facebook, Meta, released, because part of her problem was always that she deleted the original conversations that this guy pulled the crap out of, so that she couldn't show the full context. Well, Meta finally dug into the courts, got them to give it to her. Good. She's got the full conversations now. And I tell you, there's some people in the media and Press Progress and some of those other jerks are really sweating now because they're going to get the crap suit out of them. They deserve it. But again, and Smith knows now, see, she was in the right. She was giving a platform to somebody who'd been wronged, and her masters lost it on her for that. But she finally quit. She didn't stay and take it. Yeah, she stood and took it for, I think, maybe 6 more months or something, 8 more months probably. But that was the beginning of the end. Things kept happening. Actually, no, it was a little longer than that, because it was once the pandemic came in was when she really finally, and she documented that, because she tried talking about things like ivermectin or alternative. And again, she got spanked and slapped and told not to talk about it. So maybe it would be a year and a half after the interview, but she did quit at least finally. If you listen to Rob Breckenridge on there, you can see a guy who toes the line of the corporate masters throughout his show, which is too bad, because Rob used to be a lot more interesting. But Smith couldn't take it anymore. And the fact that she's incapable of taking it, even if it took a while to get there, I just see as promising.
I also think she might be a little intimidated by the lawyers. So when she was on her campaigning for leadership, she said, hey, look, we're going to update the Alberta human rights, and we're going to put medical as a protected ground. So your medical status is a protected ground. And she said, we're going to do it within the first 3 months. It's going to happen within the first 3 months. So she put a deadline on it. She got in. 3 months is coming up. She's having a press conference about something else, completely unrelated. And then at the end, she kind of said, oh, by the way, that other thing, we can't do it right now. We'll get back to it later. And then walked away. And I'm like, okay. So she sat, because her reason that she gave was, it's more complicated than I thought. It's harder than I thought. And so let's just call that legal, bumping up to the legal number one. The second one was, of course, the conflict of interest. So they went and took a look at her, and they said, okay, well, what you did here was no good, a slap on the hand. We release it right when the debate is starting, and boom. My question now is, did she just find out, now that she became premier, that there is a legal swamp and there's people in there and your hand's going to get slapped, whether it's, you think it's right or not? Because I don't know why can't she call anybody and say, hey, what can we do about this guy, or what is this whole situation? Like, why can't she have that phone call? I'm wondering if she found something out when she became premier.
No, okay. Well, yeah, she should have known that already. There is a lot of importance in separating the political leadership from the justice system itself. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
that's
supposed to do
important.
high level management of it, but they should not be meddling or poking directly into the prosecutors or the attorney general. She should have known that. I mean, you can have your opinions, but you've really got to be careful with going into specific cases. And that one, yeah, that worries me. I mean, this is a person who's very politically familiar with things. She knew, she should have known darn well. You don't. You can have your views. You could speak it. You could say, look, I really hope that our system does something better in the case of Pastor Pawlowski or some of these other individuals charged. I'd like to see that. I think they were wrong. She could say some of that. But when
Mhm.
you start meeting with them directly or dealing with the prosecutors, that's a big, big line to cross. And how did she not know that you shouldn't do that? That really that worries me. That really does.
Well,
Um,
is the concern their influence? Like they would do things that they shouldn't do because she asked? Because they should just say, no, we can't do that.
Well, she should have just known she can't do it. If you not once you're in that role of premier, you get some different responsibilities that happen once you're there.
Hmm.
It's in the same sense with Trudeau pressuring Wilson Raybould, with her prosecution
Right.
and things with SNC-Lavalin. You just stay out of it. Even if there
Oh,
isn't a self-interest, you can't touch that.
well, just like Justin, then she should just fire him and then put someone else in that will say yes, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you start doing that's another form of interference, and you can get in some trouble. And I see somebody say there's nothing wrong with talking about it. That's a cop out. I'm not talking about talking about it. I'm talking about
Mhm.
talking directly with the person who was charged, or talking directly with the people who managed the prosecution.
Okay, well, I
Those
agree with the second part of that. Yeah,
are
the
are, are,
prosecution
are
is
different different scenarios altogether. And
okay.
that wasn't, as you saw too with a lot of the conversations. Okay, she talked to Pawlowski. It wasn't
Mhm.
even just that she talked to him. It was that she implied that she would try to change things within there to help him. And that's when you start getting
Okay,
those fuzzy lines.
sure. So, what's the difference between I'll look into it and see what I can do, and I'll go do something? Like there
The,
would be a
the
difference
difference
there.
was some of her statements, and that's where she contradicts herself when she's saying, I talk to the prosecutor's office weekly about this. Well, why? You're not supposed to talk to the prosecutor's office weekly about this, at least not directly about individual cases.
Really?
It's
Okay, I didn't know that.
that's very much in the parliamentary system. You have to separate that, and that's for our own protection as well. This can happen, if let's say you were charged with something and a politician gets elected who really, really doesn't like you
Mhm.
and wants the prosecutor to come down extra hard on you. That elected person shouldn't be doing that to you either. Like they're separate entities. They're integrated, but no, she's there to draft the legislation, but not take direct part in the prosecution. That's not her role. And it's
No,
dangerous to get
yeah.
into that.
So what you're saying is she was actually a little bit more interference than maybe some of us understood. The Do you
Or at
think
least
she
the
was saying?
perception of it. And the
Well, the
perception is
perception I
reality
see.
when it comes to that. Yeah. I
Right.
think
No.
maybe
Yeah.
yeah, I think maybe she meant well, and was saying the things, but that's just what makes me start to worry about her political instincts a little. When she should have had her alarm bells go off, and at least I know people hate that careful political conversations, but when talking to Mr. Pawlowski, though, I mean, she probably didn't realize she's being recorded, but it shouldn't matter.
No.
You just have to be careful with what you say, and
Yeah.
if it was anything truly, well, the ethics commissioner found it to be a bit of a breach, but not illegal to a point of criminal charges against her. But that's how serious it is when an elected official starts directly meddling within the justice system. You got to really watch it.
Well, maybe she was a little bit. Maybe she thought it was a bit more flexible because BC can do that. They tell their justice system not to charge and arrest people for certain drug crimes now. So maybe she saw that and said, "Oh, look, it's a new world. We can just do that." And I'm being
That's
a
well,
little.
yeah,
I'm joking here, but
yeah.
that's
I know
kind
it's
of
a fair analogy, but that's getting to a higher level. To the point of if she was in power earlier, she could say, "Let's not start prosecuting these." But not this particular case. When you're starting to get into individual cases, you're getting into a bit more of a mire.
I see
Um,
where you headed with this because now it's looking like she is putting her arms around somebody and helping them in an
Potentially,
appropriate way.
yeah. It's just again, it's not good for the system or the perceptions. So the It should be more like, Mr. Pawlowski, I appreciate the situation we're in. We want to remedy this. We want to change our system. You've been wronged. You could even say with that, but
Hmm.
for now, I can't talk to you further on this until it's finished with the system, but I'm doing my part. I know it sounds like weasel words, but it's better to try to make a promise like you might directly be able to do something when it's a serious breach. You don't want those elected people being able to directly meddle with the prosecution. That'll backfire on all of us. I promise you, if you start allowing that precedent to happen.
Oh, for sure. The truckers with their bank accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we could really go down that road.
And I'm not saying it's not been abused already, and politicians have gotten away from it. But that's why we've got to call them out when they pull that sort of thing, even if it's well-meaning.
Okay. I see your point for sure, because it's more of the perception than the action at this point. And then you're going to have other people going, well, she didn't help me, or she didn't call me, and then yada, yada, yada.
That's part of it too. It's supposed to be a blind justice system, right? I mean, if she's just going to help, then she should be passing a bill in the legislature and debating it, saying we're not going to prosecute these things any longer. And if you can repeal a law or change a law, that's when you get a lot more recourse, even if somebody's already been convicted, then to start saying that they can apply for a pardon. And that was one of the things that was kind of bizarre out of her too, when she talked about pardoning people, when she should know enough about the system already.
For the tickets.
You can't do that. That's just not a power you have as a Canadian elected official. How did you not know that? But,
that's another good question. How does she not know that? Like, within even the UCP, how are they not talking to her about what she can and can't do?
Well, she certainly knows now. Again, it meant well. I mean, it's showing, I think, what she really wanted to do. I mean, why step into the mire when you didn't even succeed with it, and it just got you in a bunch of trouble? She really wanted to pardon those people, and she's, I think, still going to seek ways to, if she can't help those already convicted, at least bring in some changes. And that's kind of where you started with this, where they won't happen in the future. But we don't see the bill protecting the sanctity of the body from medication and things like that yet. Hopefully it's still coming.
Yeah, well, she said it was just harder than she thought. And I think it was Rob who brought up a good point, that it's hard. Like, what if somebody's like physically unable to do something because of their medical status? It causes them to not be able to live up to the standard like a fireman, but you can't. So according to this new addition to the protected status, so I think maybe it's complicated, but I would like more information if I could, because that really would. That was one of the big ones that people were expecting from her, because she pushed that one hard. Within 3 months, I'm going to change the Human Rights Act of Alberta to include that.
Yeah, well, and that's part of it, and that's part of it. She can't, in a circle where I talk about with activism, things like that. Pressure her, get on her case. Don't let her get away with promising it and then not doing it. That's up to us too. Hold her to account. Call your MLA. Say, hey, I voted for you to move on this. This is one of the promises that was very important to me. Where the hell did it go? Bring it up on social media. Don't let them get away with baiting and switching on us. But again, I see the commenter you pulled up saying, doesn't she have the power to pardon? And no, she doesn't. That's not a Canadian thing. American governors can pardon convicted people, and presidents can pardon people, but it's a totally different system. In Canada, the prime minister and the premiers don't have any ability to directly pardon people.
No, we have a different system. You have to kind of do your time first before anything else happens on the pardon level. Like, I did go to law school, I did finish it, so I do understand how we're supposed to keep this stuff separate, and I also understand how the attorney generals, they have like no say when it comes to anything, like even starting investigations, but I get it, and I'm cool with that. Let's switch gears a bit, because there is some good news. So Alberta, a lot of people are moving here. Some of the biggest migrations are from Ontario over to Alberta. We're complaining because our schools are full, but that's also growth. There's a lot of people coming here. We're getting more growth here. We might be coming out of the dark ages, when, like, are we going to be able to open up some of our resources? Is Danielle going to do that? Are we looking at conservative federal government soon? Is there some optimism here for Alberta in the next, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, no, I'm holding quite a bit of it. I just think it's going to be optimism in that I think we got a lot of battles ahead of us. We've got hopefully somebody willing to take them on. As you said, open up those resources, get in there. We've got Ottawa trying to shut us down, and we've got to have leadership that's saying, no, we're not shutting this down. It's ludicrous. There's demand for these products. There's resources here that are benefiting everybody, and damn it, we're going to defend these things. And I think the economic case will be made. Like the proof will come over time. Things like cutting corporate taxes, they do help the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody screams bloody murder when something like that happens, but the proof does show eventually, yes, it worked.
Right.
She'll fight against stupid policies like rent control. That's another one we're hearing a lot of, and that'll come because when the economy starts getting better here, more people are moving here. The rents are going to keep going up, and that's hard on people. It's very hard on people on a lower income or a fixed income, and it's an issue to be dealt with. But there's no dumber way to deal with it than rent control. I mean, that's a policy that's got a 100% failure rate. It's been tried over and over and over and over and over again. It never works. She won't do that. So maybe she'll address it better. Like, well, why aren't we building enough housing? Oh, yeah, because our idiot city councils are strangling growth because they got these density visions of lunacy downtown.
Right. 15-minute cities.
Yeah. And, there's going to be a lot of demand for our resources, whether Trudeau likes it or not, and we will develop them. People are moving here. Some people get worried about people moving here saying, oh, this is how we end up bringing the left into Alberta. But I don't agree. I don't agree at all. The kind of person, and I said that in the book and I've said it before, it takes courage to get up for whatever province or country you're in and say, you know what, I'm going to pick up and move and leave my safety zone, leave my family, leave my friends, start a new life, start to make a living and make something more somewhere else. That takes some courage. That's not a liberal. A liberal says, I'm entitled to stay here, give me money to stay home and do nothing. The ones who come here have ambition. They don't want to be taken care of. They want the ability to take care of themselves. So influxes of people in Alberta, we'll get some that are bringing bad attitudes and bad ideas with them, but the bulk of them are actually really good. I think some of our worst Albertans are the spoiled ones who were born here. I mean, Rachel Notley was born in Alberta. There's no guarantee that a person born in Alberta is going to have a good attitude or ideology with it. People came from other provinces or countries to get away from socialism and government control aren't going to want to see more of it coming here.
You're right. We left Ontario 2 years ago exactly for that reason, set up a homestead here. We're raising our kids here now for that exact reason. You're not wrong. A lot of conservatives are leaving.
Yeah, and they're also going to be the people saying, damn it, I went through all of that to come here, and now I'm seeing the same rot creeping in. No. I'm going to be fighting back against that. So, as I said, with independence people and Albertans, some of them have had a bit of a form of a xenophobia that's not good when it comes to people coming in. Think more pragmatically, guys. They're actually a benefit to us. They're bringing great labor and ideas and vigor, and it's helping us. I could segue into a bit more on that tipping point for independence that Quebec's doing versus what Alberta's doing with that too, with immigration, which is another one Alberta should take on. There's something we haven't talked about.
Let's go there. Immigration.
Yeah. Well, Quebec controls its own immigration. They have the say in who comes into their province and who doesn't. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. Interprovincial, I understand. It's a country. You can't stop that when you're picking and choosing because we have different professions we need. We have different aspects and controlling your own destiny, your growth, your societal attitudes, having the ability to choose who's going to immigrate into your area is a very big power towards that. I'm just talking about how Quebec has been moving to try and build that tipping point to win a referendum. I'm coming back to that, but it explains a whole lot of their policies. It really does. When they go after the guy who has a Chinese restaurant because he doesn't have French on his sign, or if they go after the civil servants because they're wearing a turban or a kippah or a crucifix, they know they're being bigots. They know that it's unreasonable. They know it's stupid because they just want to make them uncomfortable and make them leave. That's the bottom line. That's all it's about, because they feel if they can drive out enough people who don't speak French as a first language, they will finally hit that point where 60% of them are going to say, we're out. That's what they're doing. I don't want to see us take on such a nasty, bigoted way to do it, but I want us to start looking at what we do and how that will build us into a better society and one that will be able to actually bring us to independence too. Not by chasing out the wrong people with that intolerant, bigoted attitude that Quebec's doing it. More like bringing in and fostering the right people. Do it as a positive, not a negative. And it shows, again, the cowardice of this country dealing with Quebec. I mean, my Lord, to go after people for wearing religious, anything in the civil servants is a gross violation of the charter. But of course, they say we're just going to invoke the notwithstanding clause. And Trudeau and Poilievre are both abjectly terrified of seriously critiquing Quebec on that. And they get away with it. And it's terribly wrong. I mean, one of the statements out of Jacques Parizeau, the first thing when they lost the referendum in the late 90s was he blamed the Jews.
Right.
Whatever, picking out certain groups. I mean, you can blame people who don't speak French as a first language. I can understand those are the ones less inclined to vote yes to leave. But when you're starting to cherry pick exactly which groups you don't like, yeah, dude, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And likewise, I mean, the reason they're going after those religious things is because they know, yes, Sikhs don't tend to vote for Quebec independence. Jews don't tend to vote for Quebec independence. Muslim people don't. So if we just push them out of our province, we'll get there. It's not the right way to do it. Might work, but I don't see it as a principled way to do it. But at the same time, we should look at controlling our immigration so that we're building a stronger province for ourselves. Just we don't have to be pickets about it while we do it.
Well, there's a couple ways to increase the quality of the immigration. There's the, I guess, filtering and slowing down the undesirable. That's one way. Another way is to attract really good quality. So if we have a really strong economy, really good environment, and people really want to come here, we can also then attract far better quality as well. That's another way to kind of not so much dilute, but to increase the value of the base and the quality of the immigration. What do you think about
that? Absolutely. And the other part too is planning our immigration, making sure we've got the resources for the new Albertans when they get here. As somebody else was pointing out, the high interest rates and the housing shortfalls. And if you're going to bring in more and more people when you're dealing with that, how is this helping us? And it isn't if we don't fix our problems. But we have great home builders, we have great resources, we have lumber, we've just got so much legislative handcuffing going on to building more housing quickly that we can't keep up. But if we got that crap out of the way and we make sure we aren't sticking it, oh hey, we're going to stick 400 people from Sri Lanka up in Swan Hills. Well, that's not going to work out really well. I mean, right. they need a larger area to settle in, learn the language, get working. We have to make sure that the people we're bringing in are in an area where they can settle and adjust and get comfortable. But it needs to be planned. Right now, that planning isn't in our hands because the immigration is solely in the hands of the federal government. But we can take it back, just like Quebec did.
This is a good comment that just came up here. Gov Corrupt says, I have no problem with open borders. I have a major problem with open borders under a welfare state. Eliminate government handouts and access to socialized healthcare and see how many and the quality of want to come. Not a bad point there. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. We want people to come here to want to work and make a future for themselves, not to come in and just immediately suck off the system. And I think the risk comes, and there's one of the harder parts. I mean, I think it's great that we can take in refugees from areas that need to settle somewhere. But that's also where you get people then who didn't pick up and choose out of ambition to move necessarily. That's where you could potentially get some of the riffraff and the parasites because they're mixed in with the refugees, who many of whom are fantastic. But some are going to have no pride and say, well, I'll sit on welfare for my whole life. I think our whole welfare system in general needs to be, again, reformed. I mean, I believe in compassionate conservatism. We can afford it. We shouldn't have anybody freeze to death or starve to death on our watch. But also, it should be the bare minimum. I mean, where did food stamps go? Why can't we just have a rechargeable card? And that's all you could buy with this is groceries, buddy. And we'll directly pay your rent. You're not getting cash in your hands to go buy, meth or popcorn or whatever.
Sure.
We'll put a roof over your head. We'll put food in your mouth. You're not going to die, but you're not getting any more than that. You want more, you got to get up and go, buddy. You got to do more yourself. That's the base. I'm not talking about guaranteed income crap. I'm talking about we're food and shelter. That's it, and some programs to help you with employability or language or or things like that. I think those are good investments if they will get people to work. Great, but
no way for UBI. We don't need UBI.
Oh God, no.
That will kill the country right away. But what if I told you they were able to do that for you, Morgan or Cory? What if I told you they came up with a system that said, yes, we can make sure that they only get the essentials, very basics, and we can make sure that they do it right. But we have to implement digital currency to do that. What would you say?
No.
Because that's how it's going to happen. Just so you know, they're going to say we're solving this big problem with this thing, and that's exactly how it's going.
The only way to control, and I'm not only against digital currency as long as they're independent and all of it. I just don't want a state mandated digital currency, and I think you need a paper currency that's untraceable as your own a physical currency. I guess you don't have paper even or gold or whatever. When citizens lose, always it's in a monopoly situation. Any kind of monopoly, whether it's a healthcare monopoly, whether it's a education monopoly, whether it's a business taking a monopoly situation against you, or if they've got a monopoly on your financial transactions. Right. You need more than one way to do transactions, and you need to have full control of your ability to do it. And if you go full digital currency, and we know that's why we have a problem with it, suddenly you were totally under the thumb of the powers that be. And in light of what happened in the truckers convoy, that we just cannot allow that to happen. Absolutely not.
Well, you do know that the federal dental plan does have a requirement for federal ID, don't you?
Yeah, and I'm not.
That's a step towards the federalized identification.
It's a step towards it. I'm mixed on those things. I know their motive is to step us towards having just a single card or a digit or whatever that's going to identify you for every service, every purchase, everything. I mean, you're just completely controlled. But at the same time, they're already damn close to it anyhow. I mean, there's mixed things. I've got a provincial driver's license. I got a stupid falling apart paper healthcare card. I've got my firearms license. I got all this jamming it onto one card. They've got all the information already anyways. Putting it onto one for just the sake of efficiency, I'm not totally opposed to. But the financial transaction part, that's a problem. I want my separate credit card. I want my separate Bitcoin account. I want my separate cash that I can buy things with, or gold, or whatever bloody thing I want to do it with. You've got to keep those multiple means of doing it. Because, once they have the reins on a monopoly, we're screwed.
Yeah, well, my challenge on that one is a legal one. It's the jurisdiction and where you have to file if you got a problem. You're going to be filing in federal court, not provincial court. And if you're dealing with federal court, not only is that incredibly expensive and very difficult, but it's federal. Like it's my neighbors, not my neighbors who are looking at this issue and I'm dealing with. It's federal. So I think my concern there is if the jurisdiction for some of this is on the federal level, we have to go to federal court to deal with it. And that's not a fun game.
No, and we're not going to win.
No, well, I think history has already shown us as a West. Good luck with that one.
Yeah, and our conversation keeps coming back to the same place. The long goal has to be independence. It has to be, and the motivation. I mean, when I talked about frog in water, and I was talking about us bringing in incremental policies to keep moving our foot out the door. Well, that's also we got to watch for the federal government's doing the same thing, but they're bringing incremental policies to control us more and more and more all the time. And we've got to fight against those things. We've got to stand up. And but we will lose in the long run with anything shy of independence. We will. We can't beat them. It's a rigged system. I think of dealing with the government when you deal with it on their terms. It reminds me of a cousin I had who used to come up with card games when we were little kids. We'd play them, and he'd make the game, and then he'd come up with the rules. He was a smart kid. They were kind of a neat game, but then you take this card and you think you had it and you put it down and, oh no, you can't play that one right now because it's a Tuesday. Or, he just changed the rule second.
The goalpost mover. Yep.
And the federal government does that. You're playing a rigged game. We're not going to win while they're holding the cards. We've got to change the situation. St. Pierre isn't that change. I don't think he is. He could, at best, in my view, be another Stephen Harper, which means he'll get in and he'll be less bad to us than the liberal leaders are. But he won't change anything. We need change. And if Poilievre tried to change something, he'll be out because he has to win Central Canada. It's not what I say in the book. It's not personal. It's math. It's he might hate himself for not changing anything while he's in, but he won't change anything because he can't. He won't stay in office if he does. So if we got a broken system, we got to figure out how to get the hell out of the system,
Right.
and that's what I'm working towards.
Well, part of that system is supposed to be media holds our government accountable, and media is supposed to be the one shedding the light on the government. But we have state-run government or media now, or not now, but we've had it for a while. So if we're going to go really after the government and make some change, there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. But another way is to expose them, exposés, get in there, really do this check and balance of media, which we don't have anymore. So with Western Standard, you guys are obviously dealing with this issue. Do you see that you guys are picking up steam? You're getting a lot more support. People are tuning out of CBC and tuning into Western and the other ones and independent media. And do you see that this is actually going to assist maybe with this whole reclaiming our country thing?
Yes, and I'm optimistic. I think things are actually developing well. The desperation with which the government's going to try and control information and media shows that they are losing control, and it's making them desperate, and they're reaching, and the legacy media is dying, and it's a well-earned death. And I write for the Epoch Times as well, and these up and comers, the Standard's doing really well. It's growing. We've had some growing pains. We've screwed up. But we're still going, and people are subscribing. The biggest boom of subscriptions we ever had by far was during the truckers' convoy protests.
Right.
And the main reason was because people were so disgusted with what they saw when they turned on their TV sets and they could switch from CBC to Global to CTV, and it's all the exact same biased crap.
Yep.
That they said, I've got to find something else. And they sought us out and they subscribed. And they sought out the True North, and they sought out Rebel, and they sought out Epoch Times, and they took out subscriptions. It benefited us. So citizens will see through it, and they will seek alternatives. So that gave me, heartened me. And I'll tell another story I've talked about in some of my speeches and other places, because and people bring it up, and it's not polishing a turd. It's a real positive out of a negative story. If people remember with the Western Standard, at one point we really had the Kenney government on the rocks. We were getting leaks from their caucus all the time. We were constantly exposing things. The Sky Palace was going on, all sorts of double standards while the lockdowns are happening. And again, our subscriptions are going up. We're doing really good. And then this story came in about Kenney and a bunch of ministers who had been sneaking to a restaurant and partying and a private restaurant, having a good time during the lockdowns when everybody else couldn't go visit family for Christmas or anything like that. Yet apparently these senior government officials were actually partying it up in this private restaurant. Now, I still don't know exactly what happened with that. Derek doesn't talk about whatever. But it sounded like such a huge story. They got eager and didn't do, obviously, the proper due diligence and published it. And it turned out the source wasn't good.
Right.
And the legal letters came fast, and the Standard retracted quickly and apologized and had to do a number of things, which really hurt us. But now, the part that I'm saying that came out of all of that in a couple of senses is good. For one, don't get too arrogant. Stick to journalistic principles. If you don't have multiple sources corroborating, don't print it. We knew better. We blew it. And I'll still say I was part of the organization. I just wasn't part of that story. I'll cover my ass a little on it. But
sure.
But the other part was our subscriptions dropped dramatically for a month after that. And I say that's good. Because
you get punished.
That's right. That was our subscribers holding us accountable. That was them saying, you fed me BS. You gave me a bad story. You printed lies like the mainstream media. And I don't like that. And I'm out of here. I'm leaving. And it took us months to gain those subscribers back. And it's been a year and some, we're well beyond where we were then. But for a month and some, we were down. And like I said, at the time, it was terrifying. It's like, is this the end? Are we going to be able to recover? But we did. But it lets me know that the public is more cognizant of these things than people give them credit for. And it's not just with us, it's with any independent media, whether it's with yourself garnering people viewing these shows or the Standard as it grows. As long as they're accountable to the people and the viewers, people will hold them accountable. They spanked our ass fast enough when we blew it, and they will do it even more harshly if we do it again. So things can be self-policing. And that really, I felt good to know that in hindsight. terrifying at the time. But
well, that was a good lesson to learn, though, and that really got you guys kind of fine tuning the way you do things, and that's a mistake that you learned from.
The whole Western Standard Policy book. Well, like, we already had some of that in our own policies. We didn't follow it. Like, we screwed up, but that was reiterated through meetings and ourselves. Like, we do not do that again. Who's saying the Kinney story had public photos outdoors in the building? Yeah, that's the Sky Palace one. That's what had him on the rocks. That was true. But the story that the Standard put out was of him partying it up in a private restaurant with other individuals and ministers repeatedly over the lockdown. If it was true, we couldn't prove it. And if we can't prove it, you don't bloody print it. And but as I said, so that's an interesting thing for a new alternative media outlet that's growing, and for other ones that are going to grow. Like, this can work. This can work well. We just have to make sure we can always access people. And that's the fights that are coming. That's C18 that's trying to shake down Meta and YouTube and Google and the rest, and C11. But I think they'll lose. The public will seek us out. They'll get VPNs. They'll protest. They'll find ways around it, because they sought out alternative coverage during the convoy. And they also, as I said, had absolutely no use for us when we treated them poorly.
That's good, though.
It is. Yeah. And if we keep doing a good job, we'll keep growing. And if we don't, we'll fade, but another one will sprout up. It's capitalism at its best, and I love it. And I'm confident in it. So I think the media outlet, even if it looks scary right now, and it is still good in the long run. I really do think it is. We got more opportunities than we've ever had. We never had anything. Imagine starting an outlet 30 years ago of anything. What are you going to do? Buy a TV station, a printing press and a newspaper, a radio station? I mean, it could happen if you had millions behind you, but now we've got smaller upstarts that are starting at a fraction of the cost and reaching tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people. It's fantastic. It's a great new development. And part of what I say in the speech when I talk about the Standard and how we learned our lesson, we have access to more information than we've ever had before. We've also got access to more BS than we've ever had before. And the responsibility lands on our own laps to have to determine which is which. That's part of what some people don't like. They don't like their own responsibility, but that is
right. And that's where I was headed with my next question here, because you guys have a journalistic standard. You guys have written documents that say you should do this and this and this. Independent journalists, no, not so much. We kind of just start doing the job. So how do we? And some of us are not so independent. We use the term independent, but we really have, things are fed to us and we do other things. I've recognized that. We don't need to get into any names, but sometimes independent journalists are not so independent, and they don't have the same journalistic standards as an organization like you. So are we like the Wild West right now as well? And how does that help or hurt what you guys are doing as well? So we come out and report stuff, but we're not necessarily getting two sources. We report stuff and it was handed to us. Or some of us, not this guy, but some of us actually work with parties and attack other parties, but call themselves independent. So what's happening to this word independent? Is it going to really cause more problems than good? And is there really a way to make it into a valuable thing? I know it's a loaded question, but I've kind of noticed this the last month. Independent may not be so independent.
It might not be. And I mean, some are just going to come and go. I mean, it is a Wild West. There's some anarchist in me that just loves that anyways. Hey, go to town.
Yeah.
But it's self-policing. If they're crappy, as you said, the independent ones aren't necessarily going to follow the multiple source standards and things that a larger organization like ours is implementing and doing. But they've got the same viewers, and those viewers don't like being bullshitted any more than ours did. So if some of these independents are found to be, by the way, there he is at the party planning meeting with the comms people, or here's a story that was just complete baloney, or here's three stories that are just complete baloney, I think that independent individual is probably going to fall to the wayside eventually, or they're going to have to correct themselves. That's what I mean. That's what I'm so happy about. Like, it's self-governing. The people who left the Standard didn't know anything about our journalistic principles and the policies for multiply corroborating stories and things like that. All they knew is we fed them bad information and they didn't like it and they left. And they will treat the Wild West independents the same way, and they'll get exposed a little more. yeah, we're still going to get some BS thrown at us. We're going to get some people will torque something or take a story out of context and make it into something for a personal agenda. A right wing independent person can do that just as easily as a left wing independent person and self serving ones. But I'm still confident that overall it will evolve. I mean, part of what I think will happen is outlets like the Standard might grow too big and turn into what we replaced. Well, the cycle of life continues. Some small upstart will come up and eat our lunch because we turned, Starbucks used to be the little rebellious coffee shop. Now they're the corporate giant and the lefties don't like going there anymore.
Yeah, Microsoft was taking on IBM. Now Microsoft is a giant, big blue.
Yeah. So maybe the Standard will end up there and the cycle continues and it's no longer really quite independent because it got too interspersed with other things. I don't know. But I think things will just keep evolving. We get that freedom and we got to keep that freedom to be able to do a Twitter space or a YouTube broadcast or a blog even. I think it's great with Tucker Carlson. I'm not.
Yes.
I don't mind. I don't mind him. He's got his ups and downs. He's entertaining. Sure. But when he left Fox, this was amazing to watch. Though I mean, to go on and do a Twitter video. I'm seeing the development of a whole new platform. TV is going by the wayside. Fox is hurting for money, hurting for ratings, and he's pulling in over 100 million views on a Twitter video. Like, oh my Lord, this is brilliant. This is fantastic. Some clown was going after him, some media person. Oh, this is a clear failure. You don't even have good music or production standards or anything else.
Right. Look at the numbers.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters. And if you've got those numbers, you've got potential advertisers. People will want to purchase time on that, and it can sustain itself. And it's another area where independence can be lost. You tend to be a bit reticent about writing things that might be critical of your advertisers. There's dangers to that. That's why I like a subscriber system myself. We have both, though, advertisers and subscribers. But we write about things I'd never even heard the term. I'm not a career journalist, but Dave Naylor, who's our news editor, he's a career journalist. He was the editor at the Calgary Sun for decades, and he's very experienced. He's a lot of the reason why the Standard's putting out the news copy it does. I lost my train of thought there with that.
It's all good.
Yeah,
because I kind of wanted to switch a little bit more into education now. So media is the education for adults, really. That's kind of where they're pulling it out, and that's kind of fed to them. And then we also have education on the youth level. So we got this indoctrination stuff going on as well. But they're certainly pulling back on Canadian history, Canadian politics, how the system works, how you can get involved. You're not seeing any of that, and it's being replaced by other stuff. So is this like a complete fix we need to do from like kindergarten all the way up to the news subscriptions, because the information getting out is being not what it used to be, and doesn't seem like we're getting our handle on fixing that one. So do you think it starts right at the very beginning and continues from there?
Absolutely. And we need to change our core curriculum and just get back to the bloody basics. Enough social justice and that garbage. You can do that in your household, or they can learn that in their side activities, or reading their own media and doing what they like. I mean, but that's not the place of the schools. And just get it back to the basics. Now, the biggest handicap you have is the teachers' unions, and that's a big area. We never talked about unions much yet, but that's Smith's biggest enemy domestically. Anyways, Ottawa's his big enemy out there, and with the Liberals and so on. But the public service unions, the nurses and teachers in particular, are going to be the biggest thorns in Smith's butt over this next 4 years. And personally, I think her best weapon, you can't illegalize unions. It's a right. It's organizing, collective bargaining. She would never win in the courts. Right? I'd love to see some right to work legislation, but that's a separate thing. But again, competition and decentralizing. Let's get more charter schools. Let's get more vouchers. Let's get more money following the students. Let's get more variety. Let's get more non-union teaching environments. They'll still have to have a core curriculum, whether it's homeschooling or a charter school or a private school. But other than that, let parents really choose. Let's give a plethora of choices. It's particularly so a lot of non-union choices, because I got a feeling some of those non-union schools will really flourish. And those are going to be the schools that they're going to be a lineup of parents. And I want my kids in that school because their outcomes are great. And they're not filling my kid full of crap and they're not sitting with some woman whose balls fall out while she's giving a lecture to them, in the room or anything. If you want to do that, go to a sideshow somewhere else. But again, it comes down to competition, right? You have it out there. Same thing when I was talking about decentralizing the hospitals. You can't ban the nurses union, but you know what? If you put out a whole bunch of private clinics and decentralize those hospitals that really don't need to be carrying all those different procedures anyways, a lot of those aren't going to be union anymore. And that improves the service, improves the variety, improves the competition. Education, though, is where you started. You got to get it out of the clutches of that union a little bit. You can't ban it. I know Matt's saying that, but he's saying stick to the facts only, and I can agree there. I would not mind living in a world without unions, but I just also understand that it's an intrinsic right that you just can't ban. But we can certainly disempower them a lot more. They don't have to be as powerful as they are.
Well, I'm surprised they are still powerful. They let nurses down. A bunch of nurses got fired for the vax decision. They weren't there for them. We've seen this in police unions. We saw this all over the place. Even the trucker union turned on the truckers. Is that going to be the beginning of the end for these unions? And I don't know the rule here in Alberta, but do the nurses have to be in the union? Like, is that still okay? Well, then if it's mandatory, then why can't it be regulated?
I agree with you. The regulations are difficult where and how you're going to regulate.
Make it optional.
Get back to right to work legislation where, there's no more closed shops. Now, that's a huge battle. I'd love it if Smith wants to take that one on. I doubt she wants to. She's never even hinted at that much. It's been a big battle in the States. But if they're non-public facilities, they don't have to be union. And that's what I'm talking about. Let's give the vent there. We can't ban the union from the publicly owned hospital, but the privately owned one down the road might not have a union. And the nurses can work there in a non-union environment. As you said, the unions have lost their mandate. Where is a union when you've got nurses being fired for not choosing to have an injection? That's not standing up for your workers. That's not your mandate. That's not what you're supposed to be about. As Matt said there too, the unions are corrupt. They are. And they're led by social justice warriors. They're not led by labor leaders anymore. They're not there to make sure the coal mine doesn't blow up and kill you, or make sure you don't die of old age without a pension or something like that. They've lost that messaging long ago. And we got Canada Post Union talking about doing boycotts of Israel. I don't want to get into the whole discussion of whether Israel's doing good or bad, but what the hell is the union talking about with? That's not your domain. You should be talking about whether your postal workers are getting frostbite when they deliver mail. They've lost the message, and I hope their members start to turn on them. And if you give the members somewhere else to go, getting back to my faith in people, they will go. So give those charter schools, give those private schools, give it those private health facilities, and the members will leave. Just imagine the boon you would have if you own, say, a private hospital. I don't see a problem with owning a private one if it's regulated, and you have to do a degree of procedures within the public system and things. If it's hard to get good labor. Suddenly the public hospitals all just went and fired all those nurses and health staff. Well, geez, look at all those ones you can pick and choose from. Yeah, we've got a home for you. And you're going to make a better facility for it. But you need the competition. You need to give them somewhere to go.
So I worked in United Counties of SD&G. So this is Eastern Ontario, over by the Cornwall area. And I was an IT guy there, government. But one of the things I learned very quickly when we wanted to order something, order even just a stick of RAM, we had to have more than one source. We had to RFP it. We had to really have dual source or multiple source for purchases. The entire requirement was, okay, you found one, I need a second one before we can approve this. But unions are mandated and there's only one. So why don't we make unions voluntary, and you can compete on a union level? Like, why isn't there Union A and Union B? And I don't even have to join a union. I could choose or not. I think what you'll find is the union will have to compete for the members. So they'll have to compete for what they're doing for the members. It'll have to be an actual business. What would be wrong with that? Change it from mandatory to voluntary and allow competition.
Yeah, and that's what's called right to work legislation. And
so let's push that.
And like anything, the unions will get better. They don't have to go away. It's just, as you said, if they're competing hey, well, that union over there wants to work on social justice warrior work. We want to get you a better pension and working conditions.
Mhm.
Which one are you going to join? Sure, some flaky purple-haired freak show is going to go over and join the social justice one, but the person who
Sure.
actually is a regular worker and so on just wants to have a good, steady job. They're going to come to the one. I fully agree with you. I don't know if anybody's ready to take them on with that legislation yet to give that competition. You really have to change things to end the closed shops, but I want to see it. I definitely want to see it. It's wrong. It's terribly wrong that a person is not allowed to choose on closed shops or a violation of independent rights. It really shouldn't even be allowed.
Yeah, I agree completely. Now, Matt mentioned here that no unions. We already have labor laws. Yeah, that's true, Matt. We do have labor laws, but that's for the basics, and the unions go above and beyond that for other stuff. And I wouldn't want labor laws to be expanded to cover the other things that unions were also covering that labor laws were not covering. So it's a slippery slope there too, there, Matt. That's my opinion on that one. You want to comment on that, Cory?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of in the same boat with them. I mean, and they have a potential role and a right to be there, but they should be, as Matt's saying, yeah, they take the money for themselves. Well, if they're doing that, you should have the ability to quit that union and not let them take your
Exactly.
money any longer.
Yeah.
And they will have, as you said, they'll have to compete. And if there's one thing that exposes how nasty and dirty and corrupt, in my view, is some unions have gotten, is one of their biggest things that they always oppose and goes back and forth, is having secret ballots and certification votes.
Right.
And so if you're going to form a union, you're going to have a room full of people that are going to raise their hands and not whether or not they want to go union. They oppose having secret ballots. They want to make sure they see each and every worker who voted which way. Now, there's only one reason anybody ever wants to oppose secret ballots. They want to intimidate voters.
Exactly. Yeah.
The thugs want to get in there and pressure people. Why didn't you vote that way? Why didn't you do this? We know where you live. And union thuggery is entrenched in their mindset for a lot of the hardcore labor types. So that really just shows how sick those institutions have become, though. And then they're not looking out for their workers if they won't allow them that free, right of secret ballots. So these are organizations, I think, for the sake of citizens that need to be taken on and cut down to size and made competitive. Again, hey, if you want to join the one that's going to be thugs and pressure you, go ahead, but you don't have to. But that's what we need to have.
I would like to see that happen, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I didn't realize that was what it was in the what'd you call that? The right to work legislation.
Right to work legislation. There's been battles in the states over it. Certain states have right to work legislation. Certain states don't. Some people claim, and perhaps I think statistically, some of the states that have right to work legislation have had a lower wage in general for people to come out, but. It depends on which profession. It's hard to measure in general. Some of the stronger trades do quite well when there's competition, though. But the term is typically right to work legislation. So it just means I have the right to work there whether I'm with a union or not. It's not up to you.
Right. And that sounds like to me one of the ones that might make sense to start quickly, relatively quickly in a 4-year term, so that there's time for people to adjust and understand how it was a good thing before the next election. Because I can understand that you'd be concerned about losing support from the unions completely, but now do it. Give a couple years for that wound to heal, and then maybe it'd be worth it. Do you think she's that type of leader?
I hope so. One of the videos and columns I wrote, it went quite viral actually, just after she was elected. And when I said "don't blink," and that one took off really well. And it was a column just saying, "Look, you've got 4 years. Whatever you're gonna do, the big moves, do them in the first 2. Don't sit here. Don't listen to the ones pushing you. Don't blink. Don't back down." That was one of Klein's sayings in the past too. Don't blink, because they're all going to oppose you no matter what you do.
Right.
But she can't wait. You can't peel the Band-Aid off slowly. So whatever changes she does, we've talked about a whole bunch of, we're not sure which or if any or whatever. I hope she doesn't try to take on 20 at the same time, but if she picks on, 3 really strong ones. But yeah, as you're saying, do it right off the start. And then give it 2 years for people to recover, realize the world hasn't ended, and you're starting to move towards re-election. And then maybe you buy another 4 years. And hey, if you've done that, then you can really make some big changes in 4 years because you've shown, look, our changes work. They're good.
Right.
We can do these things, but she can't hesitate because they will water her down. They will wear her down.
I agree with that, and we've kind of seen that. She did her pride tweet. She came back on a couple of items. She does seem to be making sure or trying to please everybody or a lot of people at the same time. And what do you think about that? Her tweet on June 3rd. Do you think it hurt her? Do you think it helped her? What do you think she's doing with that?
It's hard to say whoever's watching. I'm fully supportive of pride. I've talked about it in the past. I grew up in school where you could call a kid a fag, and the teacher might say don't call him that. But if you called him an arsehole, you're going to get detention for 3 days.
Right.
I've grown and I got better and learned. And part of it was actually an ex girlfriend who took me to a pride event, which I think the pride events have morphed into much uglier things than when they were back in the 90s.
Back then, maybe different. Yeah.
But it was development because they were fighting against some things. They were still getting raided in their private clubs and things. And I think it was wrong. And it was important to get people to realize they're just people like anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's the activists you got to discriminate from. There's a big difference between the LGBTQ community and the activist community. And you've got to split that because the activists are nuts and they're pushing it too far and they're actually dividing people further. If anything, they're bringing more backlash against gay people.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm saying I don't have a beef with Smith talking about those things. I don't know if it's cost her that much. What's going to happen is this fringe of the trans community needs to be taken on. I mean, a lot of people who are on Twitter and everything must be familiar with Tiffany Gillis. She's a trans conservative in Alberta, very outspoken. She's more conservative than I am in a lot of ways. But she's not what the trans activist said. She wants to be trans. She's living her life as that, and she's moving along, but she's just leave me alone, let me live my life, and so be it. She's not out there with the saying, by the way, I want to flash my parts at kids in a reading center or something like that. They push the envelope too far. Somebody has to draw a line in the sand with them really soon. And I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if Smith's going to be the one to draw that line. She's not socially conservative. That's one thing people are, if they think she is, they're going to be disappointed.
Well, another low-hanging fruit could be banning or creating child safe zones. Like, simply put, there's no adult anything in these zones. We have that we keep children out of certain areas, like adult establishments, but maybe we need the reverse of that, where we have to, unfortunately, list off places without our child safe zones, which would mean you can't bring this stuff there, like libraries and schools.
Yeah, just let them be bloody kids. And the schools just stick to the damn curriculum. It's up to parents. I mean, I believe in a lot of freedoms. If there's different groups that feel that their kids should go to these, fine, book a community hall, do your thing. I wouldn't put my kids there. I think other people wouldn't. But schools, no, because now you're under a mandate where everybody's in it together. Libraries are a little different. And just to quote, I mean, somebody, Alberta Prosperity Project, we didn't really touch on them much, but I went to one of their meetings once, and I'm mixed with my relationship with Parker, but one of the things he said was interesting. So he said, what about drag time story hours in libraries? And Parker said, okay, everybody in this room, there's about 150 people. And he says, raise your hand if you've ever been on the board of your local library. And you know what? Not one hand went up.
No.
People don't even know there's a board for your local library. And there is. And in fact, at their AGM, there's usually only like 4 or 5 people show up for the thing. They're desperate for people to get on. You show up to any library AGM with 10 people, you own the board, and you can make sure there's never another inappropriate happening in that library as long as you're on the board. So some of it's our own fault. The activists have learned how to take these things over, and we've got the power to do it, but we got to get off our butts and do it. But yeah, the activists there's part of the problem. The activists are making things so much worse. They're making it worse for the people in the LGBTQ community, making it for people who aren't in the LGBTQ community. They're dividing everybody when it should be bringing people together. And I'm hoping that more of the people, the trans individuals who just want to live their lives, start calling out the activists, say, piss off. You don't speak for me. You're making things worse. Go away.
Well, you'll be happy to know there was a Twitter space last night. It was hosted by Brett Sears, and it contained Gays Against Groomers US, Gays Against Groomers Canada, and there was an incredible amount of stories there about the horrors of what's actually happening, and these groups are so against it that, Gays Against Groomers and Gays Against Groomers Canada.
Well, yeah, I mean, most gay people, they have absolutely no use for people who are into kids. It's disgusted by them as we are anybody else. It's wrong.
It's a human thing to be disgusted, not your sexuality.
Yeah. I mean, I get annoyed though when we get some people saying, "Oh, every gay wants to go for kids." No, that's being wrong, and that's being bigoted, and that's smearing. No, that there's a difference between a gay person and a pedophile. There's gay pedophiles. There's straight pedophiles. We shouldn't have any pedophiles. That's the thing we should be able to all agree on.
Right now, do you think this actually can't, like, people or activists, or is that agenda? Because it's agenda trying to get everybody hating one group and hating another group, and
Yeah,
this would be a way to do it.
I don't know if there's an agenda behind it, but that's what's happening, anyways. I mean,
Hmm.
whether somebody wants it to turn this way or not, they're just, it's bad for all of us. It's hurting everybody. And I'm getting sick of watching it. These
Yeah.
battles that shouldn't happen. I mean, we had drag shows in Calgary. My ex-wife used to work in the Denny's downtown, and the drag performers would come in after the shows at, like, 5 in the morning, because it was the only place open in the city back then. This was in the early '90s. There were no problems. People didn't care. That's their thing. They looked a little different, all dressed up, made up. They're parodies of women, fine, whatever. But it was a private establishment doing their own thing at night. Even 30 years ago, nobody cared. It's when they have the thing for the kids that we get pissed off. That's when you cross the line.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly look through these questions because we're
Yeah.
running out of time here. Let's see. A lot from Gov. Gov, I'm going to have to bring you on again. I really like your questions. I got one here. Cory, another question. How do we get these politicians from our municipalities all the way to the feds accountable when corruption exists? Terminated, fine, both, boxing match. Railroad is very in touch with her municipality and the corruption there. I've seen some before, and yeah, she's not wrong. So how do we deal with corruption starting a municipal and up? Actually, on the boards and up.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you got full out corruption, hopefully there's legal remedy to do something about it. Though I know it's difficult with elected people. And on the civic level, somebody just sent me some stuff from down at Clare's home in Southern Alberta with one of their counselors who's just horrendous down there. And we had a recall of one of the counselors in Riley, Alberta, I believe it was a small town, or a mayor. We need real recall legislation.
Right.
We don't have it. Kenny gave us fake recall legislation. He set the bar in a way we can never actually achieve it.
Now
And
BC has one.
yeah, and theirs is almost too high as well. I mean, you don't want it where it's frivolous. You don't want it where the second somebody's elected, somebody's already petitioning, and they just got to keep going through it over and over. You got to have some.
That would
bars.
happen all the time.
I understand that, but a happy medium can be found, because most people are disgusted by corruption, left or right. They're disgusted by corrupted politicians, and if one of them is flagrantly corrupted, and you've got the means of recall, you can win that. You can rip them down, and it makes an example to other ones who want to keep their job. That's one of the best ways, I think. The other part is just getting involved. As I said, with the library boards, with the municipalities, our voter turnouts are appalling. They're terrible. We got to start firing these people. We got to call them out, and we haven't been doing it. They shouldn't be getting into those civic positions for life, and a lot of them do.
Well, it sounds like we've kind of left the positions open, and certain types of people have come in and start to fill them. And if we didn't have them open, maybe there'd be more competition on who's running things around here, especially on the boards. Like you mentioned, the library boards, like nobody shows up. School boards, I talk to a lot of people and I say, hey, you have parents. Why aren't you on a school board? And the answer is very similar. Either I didn't know I could, or I'm busy. So are we getting what we pay for here? Is this kind of part of the message?
We've got the means that we won't use. And again, back with, I was going to say Alberta prosperity, but Take Back Alberta, the thing that Parker has been doing is telling people, just use the tools at your disposal. You can get active. You can get on these things. You can win these things. You can. I have a county reeve here and a councillor, because I'm in a rural constituency, and she hasn't faced a competitor in, I think, the last 3 municipal elections alone. Nobody's even run against her.
Right.
And she hasn't been all that bad, but boy, you're not keeping them honest if you won't even run against them. So we do have the power, but it's a lot of work. Yeah, it's you've had a long week. If you're talking about school boards, you're raising kids, you're making a living, and now you want to piss around with that. But if you leave it to somebody else, they're not necessarily going to run it in the way you would like to see.
Well, in closing, I actually got a bit of a question for you. So I wrote a book, and it's coming out soon, okay, called Bearing Witness. It's the ethical, legal, and practical guide to recording and sharing history. And what I'm doing with this is I'm trying to teach people how to become very, very good witnesses, legal or otherwise. So go to these events, take some video, stay a witness, don't go protesting, don't throw rocks. You're there to watch. And I have an entire chapter on whistleblowing, because that is also how we get the information out. And, things happen behind secret. And sometimes whistleblowers and witnesses are the ones that bring it to light. What do you think about encouraging people to become better witnesses? Pay attention, take a look, record, report, follow through. What do you think about that?
I love that. It's great. I remember actually applying for a security guard job once, just as a side note. But one of the things they taught in the whole thing of the course for it a long time ago was to have your notebook, document things, write them down if you're there, because these things could all end up in court later. And if you don't have them down, it might not necessarily hold up. Now we got the means, as you say, we can hold up a phone and you can
Exactly.
record somebody at these, because there's so many he said, she said at these protests or at these events. We're seeing that with that idiot MPP in Ontario who claimed he got punched in the face by an activist, and it turns out he'd smacked himself with his own.
Right. There's video.
And as you're putting it, because somebody was bearing witness and recorded that, he was caught. Because if that hadn't been recorded, he would have got away with his lie. Right. I love what you're promoting there. Yeah, the more we document, become active, and not, as you said, not throwing rocks, not getting in the middle of it.
No, you're just there to observe and
just
report.
Observe and share what you saw. It's great.
Yeah, because I think that's kind of what saved us a little bit with the convoy. It was the guys on the ground, the Viva Fries, the Zots, the people on the ground who were streaming it. It made things a lot more difficult to control that entire narrative, I thought. And I thought that was a good breaking point when it came to journalism as well, because I just completely gave up on media way before then, but I still wanted to know what's going on. And this was one way to do it. So you would encourage people to continue to go and do stuff like that, record it, share it, don't get involved, don't cause problems, go ahead.
That ties right in with what I was talking about and my optimism with more citizen journalism, independent journalism, and things like that. We have, and I mean, they can couple together. Somebody sends a video they took to the Western Standard. Hey, we can work together. We'll be happy to publish it if it's of note.
Right.
And things like that. The more eyes on the ground, because that's the fear, and that's what some people are saying when legacy media falls. Where's the local reporter? Where is the person on the ground? Well, they're still there. It's us. And with a little more training, as it sounds like you're putting together, they can be even more effective with it. So no, it's great.
Well, thank you very much. And if you want me to come by your show at any time, say, hey, witnesses are a good thing, I'd be happy to. The book's coming out in the next few weeks.
We'll talk on that for sure.
Sure. All right. I like to put my guests on the spot at the end there. A little bit of an action item. But yeah, if you see any interest or any value in me helping or chatting, reach out. I'm happy to. But on that note, I'm going to let you go, Cory. The dogs totally behaved themselves the entire time. So
a couple little barks, but not bad. Yeah.
Nothing on this end. Yeah, we're good on this end. Yeah. And it looks like the audience really enjoyed this conversation. There's a whole bunch of chats that I'll have to take a look at a little bit later. But if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you very much, Cory. I really appreciated this. You gave me a lot to think about, especially around sovereignty, Danielle, what she can do, what she can't do, grassroots initiatives. Parents need to be involved. And let's really pay attention to these boards and get some more of these parents in there. Because if you really do want these to stop, get in there and say, no, we don't do these at this library. So thank you very much, Cory. And if you have any last statements for Canada, that'd be fine. And I'll sign off.
No, that's just about it. Thanks for having me on. As you can see, I'm always happy to babble about these issues. And I like learning from these as I go as well. So, and thanks for all the commenters and viewers.
And thank you very much. And keeping you honest. Your subscribers will do that to you. And so does my crowd. I have to go. They're telling me I got to get going. But thank you very much there, Cory. And you have yourself a great day. And I'd love to chat with you again.
Sure. I'll throw in one quick curve. I see somebody commenting, asking, hey, what's my book? Sure. I'll throw my quick plug in. There.
Please.
It's the Sovereigntist Handbook. If you search it out, it's available on Amazon and other sources out there, digital and all that stuff. So,
excellent.
Sovereigntist Handbook. Yep.
And did you self-publish or you published with someone?
I self-published.
It's the way to do it. Independent, buddy.
Absolutely.
Okay, you take care, Cory. Thanks so much for your time.
We'll talk again.
Yeah, bye. Well, there you are, guys. That's Cory Morgan. I didn't remember his name for like the first few times I was announcing him throughout the week, but Cory Morgan. I am very impressed. A very nice gentleman to speak to. He will tell you what he's thinking. He's not there to, split anything. He didn't sugarcoat a thing. He was very candid, and he shared a lot of awesome stories with us. I like that. Did you guys like that? You guys like hearing from the media as well? Reaching out to them, talking about the future of the media. Where are we at? I think what he's doing there with that subscriber thing was a very good eye-opener. If the CBC had to do that, do you think it'd still be here? The CBC wasn't subsidized and they had to do straight up market and do it the right way. Do you think they'd still be here? Or would they still be here, but there'd be a very different version of them because they would be journalistic integrity. They would be doing the right thing. Either case, I know we wouldn't have this version of the CBC. So I like that. Okay. So thank you very much, Cory. It was a very good afternoon to spend with you, and I really enjoyed it. Now, folks, let me see. I may have a video to share with you. I may not. I'm not sure. Ooh, if I did, I'd play it right now. It's the promo for Jeremy. Okay. So he's tomorrow. Okay. I am doing a Saturday show tomorrow, and it's later. So it's going to be 6 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern. I thought I would put it a little bit later to accommodate the audience that we're going to draw on this one. It's going to definitely be unfiltered. It's going to be raw. It's going to be great. I've had some nice chats with him behind the scenes. He's a very nice guy, funny as heck. He likes my sense of humor too, because I have a dark one. But you're going to join us tomorrow for Jeremy McKenzie, the scapegoat of Canada. Okay. I call this episode Most Wanted because during the POEC, and frankly, for the last year and a half, he's been basically Canada's most wanted. It used to be funny, but I don't know if it's so funny anymore. And it's funny on his side, but I don't think it's so funny on the government side. But yeah, tune in for that one. It should be an excellent episode. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining me. It's Friday. We get to kind of relax a bit. We're not traveling, so we can do a bunch of other things. Padge, thank you so much. Allie, thank you so much. Everybody in the chat, a whole bunch of you showed up today. That was wonderful. We got Railroaded, Matt Hayes, Tammy. We've got, of course, Gov Corrupt. Dude, you're becoming a brother. Ellen as well. Padge, thank you very much. Peter, awesome again. I love seeing you in here, and I love seeing you in my Twitter as well, Peter. So thank you for that as well. And let me see who else we got. This is just a few here. Hooch, nice to meet you, Hooch. That was pretty good. You were just straight up with the questions and the statements. I like that. You come back, Hooch. All right, folks. That's it for me. I gotta go. I gotta go see my family. I miss them quite a bit. Railroaded, you understand. And everybody, remember, as always, God bless.